Marshall Peak Chapter 6002 Response. While the millions of human race soldiers were making the trek back home, all the Ninth Order Masters gathered aboard the only intact purifying black ink warship remaining. Compared to their peak, the number of Ninth Order Masters had undoubtedly decreased significantly, with many of the recently advanced Ninth Order Masters having perished in the battle. Only 20 or so had managed to survive. Apart from the Ninth Order Masters, Fu Guang was also invited. Everyone took their seats. Most of them were still injured, their auras weak and unstable. The battle ended not that long ago, and even with the recuperative abilities of Ninth Order Masters, it was impossible for them to fully recover in such a short time, especially since the human race was running low on supplies, especially recovery pills. One by one, the Ninth Order Masters noticed the heavy air. They might not have an idea as to why Supreme Commander Mi had gathered all of them together, but they could tell that bad news was in store for them from his expression. After the last Ninth Order Master took their seat, Mi Jingluan finally started addressing the crowd. "I've summoned you here today to confirm something." He looked around, paused for a moment, then recounted his conversation with Xiang Shan. When the Ninth Order Masters heard this, some were confused, some were lost in thought, and a few who realized the issue right away furrowed their brow. Yang Lai casually asked, "What's there to fret about with your conversation with Big Head Xiang?" He did not find anything wrong, it sounded just a normal chat to him. "There's a big problem." Mi Jingluan stared at him with a solemn expression, causing Yang Lai to realize the gravity of the situation, despite not understanding what was the problem. Xiang Shan explained, "The peace treaty we signed with the Black Ink clan back then was of paramount importance and could be said to be the turning point in the entire war. It is impossible for Brother Mi and I to forget the details of such an important matter. It would have been nothing if it was just one of us having a hard time recalling certain trivial points of the treaty, but the problem is that neither of us can remember them. When we were discussing the treaty, both of us were unable to immediately recall even some of the basic details of the agreement. That should be absolutely impossible." Yang Lai speculated, frowning. "Maybe you're too tired from the battle?" Xiang Shan focused his gaze on him. "Do you remember the first time you met Yang Kai?" "Of course I remember." Yang Lai replied readily. "How could I forget such a thing?" At that time he slowly stopped talking. Obviously, he too had noticed the problem as his expression changed and a furrow appeared on his brow. Xiang Shan then turned to the other Ninth Order Masters and asked, "Everyone, why don't you try recalling your encounters with Yang Kai, or some common knowledge about him?" The Ninth Order Masters complied. Soon a bewildered look took over everyone's face. Observing everyone's expressions, Yang Lai immediately understood that they too had encountered the same situation as him. He could not help but mumble, "How is this possible?" When Xiang Shan asked him to, Yang Lai attempted to recall the first time he met Yang Kai, but he actually couldn't immediately remember it. It was as if his memory was blocked by an invisible barrier. It was right on the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't enunciate it for some reason. After struggling for a few breaths, he finally remembered that the first time he met Yang Kai was outside Great Evolution Pass. At that time, Yang Lai was on a scouting mission with his disciples, and Yang Kai arrived to meet him under Xiang Shan's orders. At that time, Yang Kai was only a Seventh Order Master. Mi Jingluan's voice sounded in everyone's ears, "It's not just you. After Brother Xiang and I discovered this problem, we ordered our men to ask the soldiers the same questions, and they too encountered the same situation. Regardless of whether they personally met with Yang Kai or simply heard stories about him, they were unable to immediately recall the details." "What caused this phenomenon?" Wu Qing asked in a low voice. He had just tried to recall things about Yang Kai, and it was indeed as Mi Jingluan had described. "I don't know the exact reason, but I'm certain it has something to do with his shadow technique," Mi Jingluan continued. "Everyone should remember that Yang Kai said that the 8 shadows were summoned from the next 8,000 years. He also said that because those 8 shadows were destroyed, it meant that he would not exist for the next 8,000 years. Everyone nodded in acknowledgement as all of them were present when Mi Jingluan and Yang Kai were discussing this. Yang Kai said that it was the price he paid to use the shadow technique, but now it seems that Yang Kai himself had underestimated the severity of this price. He thought that the price he had to pay would be to disappear for the next 8,000 years, but in reality, Some kind of invisible force is slowly erasing all traces of his existence from this world. So, anything related to him would slowly become blurred in the memories of others. Is such a thing really possible? Yang Lai found it hard to believe the most direct way one would think that removing the traces of a person's existence in this world meant was to kill that person, but the elimination that everyone encountered now was no longer as simple as just killing Yang Kai. Even their memories of him were being lost. Mi Jingluan added before Yang Kai used the shadow technique. Even I hadn't expected for such a bizarre secret technique to exist. Yang Lai immediately fell silent. The mysteries of the shadow technique were beyond their comprehension, so the price for using it was also unfathomable. As such, no matter how unbelievable Mi Jingluan's speculations were, there was indeed a possibility they were true. This is just the beginning. What I'm worried about is we might even forget everything about Yang Kai with time. All of the Ninth Order Masters were shocked. As the greatest hero who led the human race to victory and defeated Mo, Yang Kai should be remembered for all generations. But if the human race were to completely forget about him, that would truly be a tragic misfortune. What will happen if we completely forget about Yang Kai? Mi Jingluan asked. No one could answer. He didn't ask any more, and instead postulated, before disappearing, Yang Kai said that he would return after 8,000 years, but even he did not sound certain of that. So, he might be able to return or he might completely disappear. Right now, the traces of his existence are slowly being erased, which is akin to him disappearing. If one day everyone completely forgets about him, perhaps he might never appear again. Fu Guang, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. Supreme Commander Mi, do you mean to say that if many people in this world remember him and his fame remains widespread, perhaps it can help him return? Mi Jingluan shook his head. I'm not sure, but it is possible. Then it's worth a shot. Fu Guang nodded. However, the most important thing right now is to investigate the speed at which his traces are being erased. Only by confirming this matter can we make appropriate arrangements. Agreed. Agreed. We'll do as Supreme Commander Mi says. After many days of investigation by Ninth Order Masters and questioning thousands of randomly selected soldiers, everyone reached an unfortunate conclusion. The speed at which Yang Kai's traces were being erased was increasing. More and more things related to Yang Kai were being forgotten. At this rate, everything related to Yang Kai would be completely gone in short order. By then, no one in this world would remember that there was once a hero who had saved the entire human race. Mi Jingluan couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. He immediately sent people back to the original location of the primordial heaven source grand restriction to inform Su Yan and the others who were staying there. Although Su Yan and the others would most likely notice this on their own, it was always better to be prepared. An advance team had already been sent back to relay the news of their victory to the human race forces in the rear, so a joyful mood was already spreading. When the army returned, they were naturally received with warmth and celebration. The human race army had suffered heavy casualties in this battle, losing more than 60% of its soldiers. Be that as it may, it was all worth it, as in the future, the world would no longer face the threat of Black Ink's strength. But contrary to the expectations of everyone who had remained behind, the Crusade force showed no signs of celebrating after their return. Instead, they quickly dispersed as if there was a new mission waiting for them. Soon great statues were erected in the Star Boundary Myriad Monsters world, and everywhere else the human race lived, whether it was a village, a town, or a city. The statue depicted a brave and heroic man wielding a long spear that seemed to have a dragon coiling around it. This man seemed to be staring down an invisible enemy, confronting them in battle. At the base of the statue was Yang Kai's name. Meanwhile, Mi Jingluan entered High Heaven Palace, and with the cooperation of Hua Qingxi and Xiaoning Chang, gathered all the people who had close relationships with Yang Kai. Afterwards, under Mi Jingluan's supervision, they jointly wrote a biography. Naturally, it was Yang Kai's biography, and it included all the big and small matters that had happened in his life. There were no excessively embellished accounts in it, just the simple and factual descriptions. Nonetheless, anyone who read this biography would understand how magnificent Yang Kai's life was. Everyone would come to know that in the darkest era of the human race, it was he who tore through the darkness and brought a bright ray of hope to them. They would also come to know that Yang Kai had ultimately paid a huge price to finally defeat the ancient being named Mo. and end the war between the two races that had lasted for millions of years. Most importantly, they would know that the world could not forget him. Otherwise, he would never be able to return. After this biography was written, countless copies of it were made by High Heaven Palace disciples and distributed to all the places where the human race lived, especially the places where Yang Kai's statue was erected. The Ninth Order Masters even personally placed these jade slips containing Yang Kai's biography into the statues. This way, as long as someone examined the statue, they would be able to immediately perceive the contents of the jade slip and understand Yang Kai's life experiences. Many of the human race's upper echelons were trying their best to prevent the human race from forgetting their greatest hero Yang Kai. On top of that, the Ninth Order Master once again convened a meeting after the army had returned. Everyone felt that the world was vast and time was difficult to measure, so they decided that the year the Crusade Force returned to the star boundary would be designated as the first year of the Void Era. Void was the title of one of the greatest heroes that was slowly being forgotten. As time passed away, new generations of humans were born, matured, and aged. Everyone had already forgotten about Yang Kai, even the Ninth Order Masters who had fought alongside him, but the statues that had been erected remained standing tall. Martial Peak, Chapter 6003, 8,000 Years. Void Era, Year 7, 999. The star boundary, where High Heaven Cave Heaven, which was ranked first among the 36 cave heavens, was located, had its ban on entry lifted. Immediately, countless cultivators who were waiting outside the star boundary swarmed in and spread out. The cultivators were entering the star boundary from every possible direction, and were in huge numbers. Although there were all sorts of people among the crowd, no one dared to act rashly on the star boundary. No matter what their temperament was, they had become kind and simple after setting foot onto this universe world. This wasn't just because the star boundary was the domain of the strongest cave heaven, but also because Tao temples of all the other cave heavens and paradises were located here. It could be said that one could find Seventh Order Masters casually walking the streets in the star boundary. Even Eighth Order Masters were as common as dogs. Only the sighting of the legendary Ninth Order Masters, who generally remained hidden, would cause some minor sensation. If anyone acted irreverently here, not to mention the sun tomorrow, he or she might not even see the moon tonight. The main reason why the star boundary was so lively was because the Void Festival that was celebrated once every millennia would be held here. Many of the younger generation didn't know the origins of this festival, only that a ceremony was held at the turn of every millennium of the Void Era, and it had been celebrated 7 times already. And if the one that was about to be held was also counted, this would be the 8th. Rumor had it that 8,000 years ago, the living environment of the human race was extremely harsh. At that time there was a species called the Black Ink Clan that nearly wiped out the human race and conquered the known universe. Back then, the human race was truly on the verge of extinction. However, thanks to its many great heroes and brave soldiers, the human race slowly regained their footing. In the end, the entire human race launched a grand crusade and completely eradicated the Black Ink Clan. From then on, the human race became the true rulers of this world. As for the Void Festival, it was held to commemorate all the humans who gave their lives in the war against the Black Ink Clan. It could be considered the biggest event in the entire human race. The festival would be celebrated for an entire year, during which anyone could freely enter the star boundary. It had to be known that as the territory of the strongest cave heaven, it was normally forbidden for outsiders to enter. This wasn't because High Heaven Cave Heaven was tyrannical, but because they had no other choice. Since the end of the Great War 8,000 years ago, although the human race had managed to quell the Black Ink disaster that had lasted for millions of years, they had paid an extremely heavy price. Countless masters had died in battle, while the entire 3,000 worlds had been devastated by the Black Ink Clan. The only universe worlds suitable for the survival of the human race were the ones in High Heaven territory and the Myriad Monsters territory. The number of habitable universe worlds had been significantly reduced, and as such the living environment had also suffered. Cultivation resources were also in short supply. As such, the birth of too many cultivators would inevitably lead to chaos. So, the current cultivators could no longer be as unrestrained as they were before the Black Ink Clan invaded the 3,000 worlds. Everything had to be done in a planned manner. 8,000 years ago, the Ninth Order Masters had jointly held a discussion and reached a consensus, which was that anyone with the aptitude to cultivate would have to report to the cave heavens and paradises, and their cultivation matters would be arranged by one of these top forces. This decision was strictly enforced with the joint efforts of all the human race forces. So, all cultivators of the human race, regardless of their background or cultivation, were duly noted and recorded. This decision made the already special star boundary even more exclusive. The star boundary had a world tree clone, and was the first open heaven realm cradle. The second open heaven realm cradle was the Myriad Monsters world. In the years when the human race was fighting the Black Ink clan, the two open heaven realm cradles, the star boundary and Myriad Monsters world, had given birth to many high-rank open heaven realm masters. It could be said that these two open heaven realm cradles played a huge role in the human race's victory in the final battle. However, after the war ended, because of the limit in habitable areas, it was difficult for the human race to withstand the birth of so many new generation cultivators, which put the star boundary and Myriad Monster world in an extremely awkward position. After returning from the crusade and realizing this problem, the human race's higher-ups made another decision, which was to withdraw everyone from the star boundary and Myriad Monster world, especially the large number of ordinary people. These ordinary people could not cultivate, but given their huge numbers, they could give birth to many children, some of which would have the aptitude for cultivation. If restrictions weren't put in place, it wouldn't be long before new generations of cultivators were born, which would inevitably lead to unnecessary unrest. Even the people who remained in the star boundary and Myriad Monsters world were forbidden from having children. If they wanted to have children, they would have to leave these two open heaven realm cradles. Of course, the human race's upper echelons also knew that cutting off all avenues forward was not sustainable, so they left behind a glimmer of hope. That hope lay in the Void Festival that was held every 1,000 years. During this one-year-long grand festival, everyone was allowed to freely enter and exit the star boundary. If one could join one of the Tao temples of the various cave heavens and paradises, they would naturally be qualified to remain in the star boundary to cultivate. It was difficult to calculate how many people had entered the star boundary every time the grand festival started, but the number who could truly worship the various Tao temples was not that high. This led to a strange phenomenon, which was that many pregnant women or young married couples would enter the star boundary during the festival. Those pregnant women would then find a place with excellent world energy and live with their families, nourishing their fetus in peace, so that their unborn babies could enjoy the feedback from the world tree clone. As for those young couples, they were only 2 when they arrived, but when they left, their wives' stomachs would most likely be bulging. Oh, Jade Mountain Square, an extremely common market in the star boundary. Because of the decisions made in the past, a large number of humans were relocated away from the star boundary, leaving it quite sparsely populated, owing to which places like Jade Mountain Square were usually deserted. In other words, this place was only bustling with humans because the grand festival was approaching and countless people had poured into the star boundary. A young couple was strolling around the market, holding hands. The man was suave and handsome, whereas the woman was as beautiful as a flower. They were a perfect match. The woman's belly happened to be slightly bulging. She was obviously pregnant. At this moment, the husband and wife arrived before a tall statue and looked up. The wife kept reaching out to her husband's hand, who helplessly handed her the food in his hands and grumbled, "I told you not to eat so many sweets, why don't you listen?" His wife didn't even spare him a glance and bit down on the candied fruit in her hand, mumbling, "Who says I am the one who wants to eat it? Clearly it's the child in my stomach who wants to eat." The husband couldn't help but roll his eyes. Every time she brought up the child in her womb, he couldn't do anything about it. "Dear, do you think this Yonkai really exists?" The wife quickly finished a stick of candied fruit and took another stick from her husband's hand. Why are his statues everywhere? Wherever they went, wherever a human settlement was present, they always found such statues. Rumor had it that these statues had been standing for nearly 8,000 years, and had not been eroded by the passage of time at all. Obviously, they were protected by the power of an expert. "How would I know?" the husband brusquely replied. His wife muttered to herself, "His biographies are everywhere, and it seems that everyone has read it intensively. Moreover, according to his biography, he used some kind of profound space-time secret technique in order to defeat the ancient enemy, which caused all traces of him to be erased from people's minds, and that he would never be able to return if everyone truly forgot about him. Counting the time, it just so happens that when this festival starts, it will be the time for him to return. Dear, why don't we go take a look? The husband's face darkened. Why are you looking for him? He's a hero. We humans can have today thanks to his efforts and sacrifices. It's only right that we pay respect to him. His biography has been passed down for 8,000 years. Who knows if it's true or not? I think he must be a wise and mighty man. Crunch. Crunch. Why are you eating my candied fruit? So sour. It's obviously very sweet. According to his biography, he had many wives. Humph, you finally exposed your wild ambitions. My dear child, your father doesn't want us anymore. Our lives are really miserable. No, that's not what I said. Don't be ridiculous. Everywhere where the humans were gathered, similar conversations were happening between the young couples. Under the vigorous promotion and maintenance of various major sects, the biography compiled by Mi Jingluan had been widely circulated these past 8,000 years. It could be said that any human older than 10 had read Yang Kai's biography at least once. As far as the later generation was concerned, this biography was just a storybook, allowing them to understand the magnificent life of a man named Yang Kai. As for whether the records in this biography were true or fabricated, no one could confirm. This was something even the ancient cultivators of the cave heavens and paradises were unable to determine, because in their memories, many of the things recorded in the biography had indeed happened, but none of them had the slightest impression of the man named Yang Kai being there. If this was really the backlash of the so-called shadow secret technique, it would be too terrifying. Meanwhile, the Ninth Order Masters had gathered at High Heaven Palace. Compared to the crusade back then, the number of Ninth Order Masters had undoubtedly increased. There were more than 100 Ninth Order Masters. After all those rising stars, who possessed the aptitude to advance to the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm, had gradually advanced over the last 8,000 years. In the main hall, everyone was talking in small groups. Unless there was something important, the Ninth Order Masters seldom gathered together. The Ninth Order Masters also rarely appeared in public. Only a grand event like the Void Festival could gather all the Ninth Order Masters together. With over 100 Ninth Order Masters, the human race's foundation had reached a peak that it had not seen in over 10,000 years. Whether it was the newly advanced Ninth Order Masters, or the old veterans, all of them had participated in the war against the Black Ink clan. Now that they had gathered together, it was only natural for them to reminisce about the glorious past, and as they watched the current generation compete against each other. Ouyang Lai was especially boisterous as he moved through the crowd. When he started talking about the great battles he had fought in the past, he unceasingly beamed with joy. When he got excited, he even pulled his disciple Gong Lian over. In the past, when this old master was only an 8th Order Open Heaven Realm master, when I fought against a pseudo-royal lord alone, that pseudo-royal lord wet his pants in terror. This brat saw it with his own eyes. Hey, tell them. Martial Peak, Chapter 6004 Chanting. Gong Lian, who was still called Brat by Ouyang Lai, had already reached the 9th Order. Basically, his cultivation was the same as Ouyang Lai's, but as there was still a master and disciple relationship between them, even if he was a 9th Order master, he could not go against Ouyang Lai. So, he could not help but nod his confirmation after hearing this. Honored master is telling the truth. Ouyang Lai's laughter became even more carefree. A few of the newly advanced 9th Order Masters also started laughing, all of them knowing how Ouyang Lai loved to brag and deciding to just go along with it. All of them had witnessed or experienced the might of a pseudo-royal lord firsthand, and it was definitely not something an 8th Order Master could contend with, unless they formed a battle formation. Be that as it may, back when there weren't many 8th Order Masters, Ouyang Lai had indeed fought a pseudo-royal lord alone, and it was him who was beaten to the point that he had wet his pants. Even so, fighting a pseudo-royal lord alone was still an incredible feat in itself. At that moment, the noisy hall suddenly fell silent. Everyone stopped blowing their own trumpet and raised their eyes, looking directly above. In that direction was a calm and composed, half-white-haired 9th Order Master with a smile on his lips. He swept his gaze over everyone before addressing them. Ladies and gentlemen, It's been 1,000 years since we last met, but it seems everyone's noble bearing is still the same. There are also a few new faces, very good. Everyone greeted with a bow. Greetings, Supreme Commander Mi. The person who had arrived was none other than Mi Jingluan. Although the human race's crusade force and the various armies had been disbanded, Mi Jingluan's title of Supreme Commander had remained. In terms of cultivation, Mi Jingluan might not be the strongest Ninth Order Master, but in every battle against the Black Ink Clan, he had played a far greater role than any other Ninth Order Master. There was no battle in which he had not racked his brain hard to map out a strategy for victory, and it was he who had ultimately coordinated and dispatched the various troops. He was a cultivator of the same era as Ouyang Lai Xiangshan and Wei Junyang, but if they were to stand together, Mi Jingluan would definitely look older because he had been under even greater stress and for a longer duration during the thousands of years of war. Above the main hall, Mi Jingluan returned the greeting before continuing. It's the day of the Void Festival. Counting the time, this is already the 8th celebration, and I'm sure everyone knows what this means. Hearing this, everyone's expressions became solemn. For a long time there have been gaps in our memories. There appears to be traces of a person's existence in many key memories, but whether it's us or others, none of us can remember this person. I don't know what kind of mood I was in when I oversaw the compilation of this person's biography, but now that I think about it, it was definitely the best decision I've ever made in my life. All the signs indicate that this person should have really existed, and that all the accounts in this person's biography should indeed be true. This person is the greatest contributor to the human race's victory over the Black Ink Clan. Unlike the cultivators with low cultivation, although the Ninth Order Masters present here had some gaps in their memories, these missing memories could be perfectly filled in by Yang Kai's biography. Therefore, they could conclude that Yang Kai really did exist and the records in his biography were not fabricated. The reason they had forgotten about Yang Kai was because of the mysteries of the shadow secret technique. A hero cannot be allowed to be forgotten. Otherwise, the current human race does not deserve to live. 8,000 years have already passed, and it is time for him to return. The Void ceremony has been conducted precisely for this moment. Everyone, the arrangements we had laid back then should be used. It's time to witness the truth. The world only knew that the Void Festival's ceremony was a grand event for the entire human race, but didn't know that it was a hidden hand Mi Jingluan and the other Ninth Order Masters had arranged long ago. When they had set up this contingency back then, perhaps they had still not completely forgotten about Yang Kai, but now they really could not remember anything about him. It didn't matter if they didn't remember though, as long as the plan worked. Please instruct us, Supreme Commander Mi. The Ninth Order Masters cupped their fists. Mi Jingluan lightly smiled. Then let us see if all of this is just an unrealistic conjecture on our part or if we really have forgotten something. One after another, the Ninth Order Masters received their orders and flew out of the hall, quickly disappearing, leaving only one Ninth Order Master behind. This was a titled Great Emperor recognized by the Star Boundary, and the only surviving Great Emperor who had managed to break through to the Ninth Order. There had been other Ninth Order Great Emperors from the Star Boundary, but they had all fallen during the Crusade. The hall sunk into complete silence as Mi Jingluan and the Great Emperor patiently waited. 10 days later, Mi Jingluan finally opened his eyes and glanced at the Ninth Order Great Emperor. It's about time. The Ninth Order Great Emperor slightly nodded before slowly closing his eyes and spreading his divine sense. The next instant, he had become one with the entire Star Boundary. Right then, in every settlement across the universe world, Yang Kai's statues, which had stood tall for 8,000 years, suddenly started glowing, attracting the attention of countless people. Soon after, a voice started to reverberate from the statue, chanting something. What the voice was reciting was the contents of Yang Kai's biography. The voice seemed to contain some kind of mysterious power, causing everyone who heard it to involuntarily stop in their tracks and quietly listen. As the chanting continued, an enormous picture scroll seemed to have filled everyone's vision. The picture scroll was impressively portraying the life of a cultivator named Yang Kai, and how he gradually grew to become the strongest, eventually leading the human race to defeat their enemies. Not just in the Star Boundary, even in Myriad Monsters territory, on every universe world where the humans lived, the setup in the statues was activated by the Ninth Order Masters. At this moment, that chanting was simultaneously ringing in the ears of trillions of humans. Once, twice, 3 times, Gradually, people began to read along the voice coming from the statue. Almost everyone had read Yang Kai's biography, and many scholars had even memorized it by heart. Only, the biography which in the past was only read to pass time was given heavy importance today. Trillions of humans were chanting the void great emperor's real name. At the same time, in the distant void, on the battlefield where the final battle between Yang Kai and Mo was fought, a few people were gathered together inside a floating palace. There weren't many people, only a dozen or so, but apart from a middle-aged couple, the lowest cultivation of the others was the 8th order, and there were actually quite a number of 9th order masters present. Everyone gathered here was Yang Kai's close relative. His parents, his wives, his disciples Yang Xiao, Yang Shui. These people had been waiting here for 8,000 years. Xia Ningchong had originally stayed behind to guard High Heaven Palace because, despite her high cultivation, she had very little experience in fighting. Moreover, she was an alchemy great grandmaster and was more useful stationed in the rear. However, for the final crusade even she was roped in. After their triumphant return, once Xia Ningchong had helped compile Yang Kai's biography with Mi Jingluan. She immediately returned here. Naturally, Mi Jingluan immediately set out to fetch all those close to Yang Kai, bringing Yang Yingfeng and Dong Suzhu here to meet up with Su Yan and the others to wait for Yang Kai's return. Their wait had now lasted for 8,000 years. Martial Peak Chapter 6005 Supreme Master. The shadow technique's backlash struck without any notice, and was impossible to guard against. At first, Yang Kai's relatives could still remember him, but gradually, all their memories of him began to fade away, and eventually disappeared. One after another, gaps began to appear in everyone's memories. For a period of time, everyone had even forgotten why they had gathered here until they remembered that they were waiting for a very important person. As for who that person was, none of them had any impression of him. The biography that Xia Ningchong brought back with her had a great effect. The things recorded in the biography and the remaining memories in their minds perfectly complemented each other. This helped them know that a person named Yang Kai had appeared in their lives, and that person held quite a huge place in their hearts. Not far from their location was a void corridor leading straight to chaotic dead territory. At this moment, a figure walked out from the void corridor. It was none other than Zhang Ruoxi. Ruoxi's cultivation was currently at the peak of the 9th order, though the wings on her back had disappeared due to separating from the power of Yin and Yang. Her Heaven's Order bloodline had been almost completely burned out in the final battle, so she was no longer able to maintain the delicate balance between the two opposing powers. So she had no choice but to return to chaotic dead territory and strip away the power of Yin and Yang. Although the loss of her Heaven's Order bloodline was a significant detriment to her, it didn't have much of an impact on her personal strength. It was just that it would be difficult for her to regain the phenomenal power she had displayed that time in the future. Walking out of the void corridor and identifying her bearing, Ruoxi quickly arrived at Su Yan and the others' location. Noticing her appearance, everyone looked at her. "It's starting," Ruoxi stated softly. Everyone nodded as a solemn look took over their faces. On the platform in front of the palace, everyone sat down cross-legged and calmly started reciting Yang Kai's name. At first, nothing out of the ordinary happened. Over the past 8,000 years, everyone had done similar things countless times just to remind themselves not to forget that name. However, as time went by, a different feeling slowly began to rise in their hearts. Everyone felt suffocated, as if there was a mountain pressing down on them, one that was becoming heavier and heavier. As this suffocating feeling grew stronger and stronger, the forgotten emotions also began to awaken, and along with them, a painful longing gripped their hearts. No one knew who they were missing, and none of them had a clear picture of them in their heart, but they had this feeling that someone who had left a deep mark in their lives had been forgotten, and that person's name was Yang Kai. In a vivid and colorful mysterious void filled with chaos and distortions, a tall and stalwart man with a sword in his hands let out an angry roar before swinging it down. This sword strike almost cut the space-time river in two, revealing Yang Kai's flickering figure behind it. By the time the water rolled back after the strike, Yang Kai had already arrived before the sword-wielding man. He then raised his hand and pointed a finger towards the opponent, sending a wave of water towards the stalwart figure. The stalwart man's expression instantly changed. Having fought Yang Kai for thousands of years, He naturally understood the might of this seemingly unremarkable wave. This wave contained the might of 10,000 grandas, so even he didn't dare to let himself get swallowed by it. The stalwart man raised his sword and slashed out, shattering the incoming wave and splashing droplets of water flying in all directions. At the same time, the stalwart man quickly withdrew as if he was avoiding snakes and scorpions. Yang Kai didn't chase after him and simply stood in place. Yang Kai sighed in his heart. When he had used the shadow secret technique to defeat Mo and was corroded by the space-time Tao strength, he basically thought that he would fall into a deep slumber or something similar, but how could he have known he would appear in this mysterious place in the blink of an eye? After arriving here, Yang Kai began exploring, and to his astonishment, he discovered he was not alone here. There were actually many other masters. These masters were no weaker than him, with some even being stronger. This revelation left him in total shock, because in the entire world, whether it was his cultivation or his comprehension of his grandas, no one could hold a candle to him. Even Mo, who had 30% of his source sealed, had been killed by him, so who in this universe could be his opponent? But here, there were many masters here who could exchange blows evenly with Yang Kai. What left him even more speechless was that the people here were all extremely belligerent. It did not matter whether there were any grievances between them or not. Once two parties met, a fight broke out at least 90% of the time. Battles seemed to become the prime motivation for the survival of the living beings here. In the beginning, Yang Kai had suffered quite a bit. But his situation gradually improved over time as his injuries healed and his comprehension of the 10,000 grandas deepened. He also made a friend. That man's name was Chongjiu, and he was also very powerful. When Yang Kai was being hunted down after first arriving, the man acted out of righteousness and helped him out. Through his conversation with Chongjiu, Yang Kai finally understood that this was a place of exile for all masters who had touched upon the taboo. In other words, everyone who was here had touched upon the secrets of the heavens at one time or another. Yang Kai had summoned shadows from the future, which was a taboo. Although he didn't know what Chongjiu had done, he was certain he had done something similar. As such, this place was simply dubbed the Taboo Realm. What's more, anyone who entered this place would be quickly forgotten by the outside world. All memories related to those who entered this place would be erased in short order. In the 3,000 worlds, there were definitely very few living beings who could compare to Yang Kai. Yang Kai then recalled the universe furnace and its process of creating new universe worlds, and immediately understood that the masters here all came from different worlds or even universes, ones far beyond the boundaries of the 3,000 worlds. Each and every one of them had reached the pinnacle of their strength in their own realm, and had even touched upon that which should not be touched. Yang Kai had once asked Chongjiu how to escape this place, and the latter hid nothing. He knew more things than Yang Kai as he had arrived a bit earlier than him. According to him, it wasn't impossible to escape from this place. In fact, there were two methods to escape from here. However, whether these two methods really worked or not was still open to debate, because there had never been a precedent of anyone leaving this place. The first method was to continue fighting and kill the masters from other worlds. Perhaps if they killed enough of them, they might be able to leave. No one knew who proposed this idea, but it sounded a bit unreliable because there was no basis for it. The second method was much more plausible, and it was to have the people of your universe still remember you and wish for your return. A person will die twice in their lifetime. The first time is when their life ends, and the second time is when the last person who remembers forgets them. As far as we are concerned, we may still be alive here, but the world we used to live in no longer remembers us, so we are dead to that world. If we want to rise from the dead, enough people must remember you for you to break through the restrictions here. These were the exact words of Chongjiu, and Yang Kai remembered them very clearly. At that time, Chongjiu had been drinking the spirit wine he had taken out from his small universe while saying these words. Although this second method was much more reliable than the first, it was still impractical, because once someone entered this place, his or her respective universe would be affected by the restrictions, wiping every single memory related to him or her in a very short time. Once the memories were wiped out, everything was lost. Even if there were some written records left behind, they would just become dust in history over time. Saying so, Chongjiu patted Yang Kai's shoulder. "Little brother, just stay here. Although there's no way out of here, it's still quite lively." It was indeed quite lively. Supreme masters of many worlds were gathered here, fighting non-stop every day. This kind of thing would be rarely seen in the outside world, but here it was a common occurrence. At that time, Yang Kai just responded to Chongzhou in one sentence, "I will be able to get out. My world will never forget me." Chongzhou looked at him like he was looking at an idiot and threw a sentence, "I'll be waiting for that day." Calculating the time, that day should be arriving soon. While Yang Kai was lost in a daze, the tall and stalwart man had returned at some point and sent a fearsome sword wave at him, forcing him to dodge. From nearby, Chongzhou's playful laughter rang out, "Yang Kai, don't die. If you die, I won't be able to watch the good show." He had already arrived a few days ago as promised, wanting to see if Yang Kai could really leave this place. Although he felt that Yang Kai didn't have much hope, since he made a deal, he naturally had to abide by it. Unexpectedly, someone came to seek revenge on Yang Kai at this point. Although it was called seeking revenge, the truth was that there was no great enmity between them. The sword-wielding man had fought with Yang Kai at least 100 times over the past few thousand years, and neither of them had been able to do anything to the other. But this time he actually brought a companion, wanting to overwhelm Yang Kai with numbers. But unbeknownst to them, Chongzhou happened to be together with Yang Kai. A battle had broken out immediately afterwards. Yang Kai was up against the sword-wielding stalwart man, while Chongzhou dealt with his companion. At this moment, a towering tree had emerged behind Chongzhou. It was gently swaying, glittering and shining as if it was cast from gold. One after another, its leaves whizzed through the void, cutting space apart. Its every move carried endless power. Chongzhou's opponent was forced to retreat every time he tried to press forward. After fighting for a while, the master couldn't help size up Chongzhou before asking, "The Dao tree lineage?" Chongzhou raised his brow. "You've seen it." The master continued, "The Dao tree lineage is famous throughout the heavens, and I had the honor of experiencing it firsthand once before." Saying so, he put away his weapon. "I won't fight anymore." Chongzhou smiled slightly. "I was thinking the same." Battles were common occurrences in the taboo realm, but there were many cases where a simple smile and greeting could wipe away all enmity. After all, everyone's strength was about the same, so unless there was some kind of irreconcilable grudge between them, no one was willing to really fight to the death. For example, someone like the sword-wielding stalwart man who repeatedly sought trouble with Yang Kai was actually quite rare. He kept attacking Yang Kai mainly because Yang Kai had only been here for a short time, and the sword-wielding man believed that he was an easy target. Owing to repeated battles, Yang Kai's strength had grown significantly over the past 8,000 years. This wasn't surprising though, as Yang Kai did not get the time to consolidate his foundation and perfect it after swallowing and refining Mu's space-time river before he was forced to fight Mo to the death. It wasn't until he had entered this place and fought battle after battle that Yang Kai finally digested the benefits he had obtained from Mu's final gift. Furthermore, his small universe's foundation was constantly increasing. If he was allowed to go 8,000 years back in time to deal with Mo, he would definitely not end up as miserable as before. Martial Peak, Chapter 6006 Breakthrough. The masters in the taboo realm came from different universes, so the cultivation systems were naturally different as well. For example, the world where Chongzhou came from did not cultivate the open heaven realm method. The denizens of his world had their own way of dividing the realms. Be that as it may, the fundamental principles of cultivation were more or less the same. At Yang Kai's and the others' realm, the prime focus of cultivation was the comprehension and application of the Grand Das. The shining golden tree behind Chongzhou was his Dao, the space-time river was Yang Kai's Dao, and the sword-wielding stalwart man fighting Yang Kai had a Dao of his own. The sword in his hand was precisely his Dao. Yang Kai had never seen a master with such a pure Dao. Yang Kai had seen and fought many masters over the past 8,000 years, but none could compare to the sword-wielding stalwart man in terms of pure offense and aggression. In any battle, the stalwart man was constantly on the attack, essentially disregarding defense entirely. At most, he would dodge a little when necessary. Fighting such a person was incredibly frustrating, and it was extremely difficult to reach a conclusion, as the only way to settle things with any sense of finality was for someone to die. "Jianba, there is no enmity between us. Why must you insist on fighting?" After exchanging blows for a while longer, Yang Kai shouted as the waves under him swirled. Jingba, who was standing right across from him, hideously grinned. Why bring up enmity in this damned place? Since I'm here, one of us will die today. The question is whether it will be you or I. Yang Kai slowly shook his head. He was completely unable to reason with him. If the shadow secret technique could be used, Yang Kai was confident he could defeat Jianba. But he had already summoned shadows from 8,000 years of his future when he was fighting with Mo, which ultimately caused him to be trapped here. He was basically unable to use the shadow secret technique. Shadows of the same space-time could only be summoned once. Helpless, Yang Kai could only use the power of his space-time river to fight ceaselessly with Jianba. However, Yang Kai was feeling uneasy for some unknown reason today. He thought that he was feeling unnerved because the 8,000-year deadline was approaching, but later he realized that wasn't the case. He could not afford to get distracted when fighting someone as powerful as Jianba. So, how could he have the spare energy to consider the 8,000-year deadline? What caused him to feel uneasy must be something external. As such, he was slowly losing ground against Jianba. Chongjiu, who was watching the battle from afar, noticed this unusual situation and couldn't help but furrow his brow. Nonetheless, he too had no idea what was going on with Yang Kai. Furthermore, he was being marked by Jiangba's companion. He could not lend Yang Kai a hand, and could only wait and watch. Fearsome Dao strength shockwaves spread into the surroundings as the two men clashed endlessly until at one point, Yang Kai suddenly heard a shout ring in his ear. Yang Kai instantly fell into a trance, but before he could hear it clearly, Jianba had already disappeared. Immediately, a sense of crisis gripped his entire body. Yang Kai knew that he was in real trouble. His figure quickly distorted and faded away, but the next moment, Jiangba arrived before him and slashed down at his fading figure. A splash of blood spattered into the void while Yang Kai's figure appeared in another direction, promptly covering his abdomen. Apparently Jiangba's sword had cut him, leaving a gaping wound. The indistinct shout once again rang in his ear. Yang Kai shook his head trying to disperse this strange sound, but to no avail. Just after the first shout, a second shout soon followed and then a third, a fourth. In just a few breaths, Yang Kai felt countless voices ringing in his head. These countless voices jumbled into an incoherent noise before eventually converging into two words. It was naturally his name. Having wounded Yang Kai, Jianba doggedly pursued him, but just as he was about to make his move, a great sense of horror suddenly gripped his heart. The moment this sense of horror emerged, Jianba's eyes went wide. It was not terror or fear Jianba felt though, but instead extreme excitement. Because ever since his cultivation had reached its peak, no one had been able to give him such a feeling. Even in this taboo realm, where he had encountered countless masters, no one had struck true terror into his heart. But at this moment, against an enemy who had been wounded by him, this long-lost feeling had reappeared. Jianba couldn't help but recall the masters he had faced when he was weak. The sword that had accompanied him all his life began to hum, warning him to retreat. Jianba didn't retreat though. Instead he swung his sword down, causing the expressions of Chongjiu and the other experts watching from afar to become extremely solemn. Because this attack could be said to be the strongest sword attack they had ever seen. It was Jiangba's all-out strike. Once he executed this attack, his target would definitely die. The sword light filled everyone's vision, blinding them. When the sword light disappeared, Chongjiu and the other master quickly looked up, and what entered their sight made their eyes crack wide open in shock. Much to their surprise, Yang Kai had not blocked that sword strike at all and simply let it fall on his shoulder. It almost severed his arm, but it didn't, as the endless river water happened to be wrapped around Jianba's sword and wrist, preventing him from following through. Although Yang Kai was injured, his expression was extremely strange. He seemed a little confused yet also a little relieved. What caught Chongjiu's attention was the void behind Yang Kai, which looked extremely unusual at the moment. It happened to be continuously distorting, and through this distorted space, a faint distortion of space-time emerged from some unknown place. The restriction of this place had been broken. When Chongjiu recalled Yang Kai's confident words, his heart began to pound violently. Could it be that the rumors circulating in the taboo realm are true? Did enough people in Yang Kai's universe still remember him? But how is that possible? Anyone who entered this place would be quickly forgotten. Otherwise, how could the masters who had entered this place be unable to leave even after so many eons? But other than this possibility, Chongzhou could not find a better explanation. Yang Kai, he quickly called out. Yang Kai, who was immersed in this wonderful feeling, raised his head and smiled at him before turning to look at Jianba, who was still standing at arm's length. Under Jianba's stunned gaze, Yang Kai stretched out 2 fingers and grabbed his sword. It turns out that only by breaking the restriction here can one pry into the higher realms of the martial Tao. Saying so, Yang Kai gently raised his fingers, lifting up the long sword that had cut into his shoulder. The corners of Jianba's eyes twitched violently as his instincts were giving off warning bells. At this moment, Yang Kai gave him a very strange feeling, as if he was about to achieve some kind of breakthrough. This feeling left him in a great shock. The masters in the taboo realm had already reached their limits. The reason they were trapped here was because they wanted to break through to higher realms, but in the end they had touched upon the taboos of the heavens. Today he had seen both an amazing truth and an incredible secret. Breaking the restriction of this place would allow one to gain insight into the next realm. This was a huge blow to Jianba's mental state. Not to mention him, even Chongzhou, who was watching from afar, and the companion Jianba had invited, felt the same way. Stand down. Yang Kai looked at Jianba and declared. Jianba naturally ignored him, gritting his teeth as he poured all his strength into the long sword and pushed it down without muttering a word, seemingly intent on cutting Yang Kai in two. The sword in his hand was his Tao. Backing down would be equivalent to abandoning his Tao, so how could he possibly agree? Martial Peak, Chapter 6007. He left? Whether it was High Heaven Territory Star Boundary, or the Universe Worlds of Myriad Monsters Territory, everywhere where humans had settled, humans were chanting Yang Kai's name non-stop, singing his praises, spreading the name of Void Great Emperor. For the first few days, nothing unusual happened, but as time passed, a strange sound started ringing in everyone's ears, like waves crashing onto the shore. Furthermore, the sound became louder and louder with the continuous actions of the humans. Finally, at a certain moment, a strange phenomenon occurred. Everywhere the humans were gathered, a river suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The sonorous sounds of waves crashing were originating from the river, and everyone witnessed this magical sight. The water in the river swelled and flowed towards the horizon, passing through the endless void, flowing through one great territory after another, to the late ancient era battlefield, and finally converging on the final battlefield where Yang Kai and Mo fought each other. The dozen or so of Yang Kai's close relatives in the palace looked excited at the sight of this. Their chanting became more hurried, and their expressions more fervent. The river was illusory at first, as if it existed in another space-time, but it soon became real and tangible. Immediately afterwards, a figure emerged from the tumultuous waves in the river. Looking at the figure standing in the palace, the figure cracked a smile and stated, "I'm back." The figures in the palace broke into tears of joy as they swarmed towards the figure one after another. Oh! Meanwhile, the masters in the taboo realm soon got the news and rushed over. Over 100 people had gathered in a short time, and more were still coming from afar. These people were all supreme masters of their respective universes. Each and every one of them had reached their own limits. Every single one of them used to be a legendary figure where they came from, but now their worlds had long forgotten about them, causing them to be trapped in this taboo realm. Over 100 of the strongest masters in existence were calmly standing around the location where Yang Kai had fought with Zhang Ba, staring at a corpse floating nearby. The corpse naturally belonged to Jianba. Jianba was tightly holding a broken sword in his hand, while the cause of his death was none other than the other half of his sword being rammed through his chest. Dead. There was no shortage of brave and ruthless men in the taboo realm, and battles broke out all the time. These were the kind of battles one would seldom see in the outside world. Be that as it may, very few people actually lost their lives during these fights. Because although the cultivation methods were different for universe to universe, everyone's prime focus would be their Tao, after their cultivation had reached its utmost limit. It could be said that all things lead to the same destination. As a result, everyone's strength was basically the same here. So, no matter how intense a battle was, very few people would die. The last time someone died was over 100,000 years ago, And that was because a certain man with a horrible personality ultimately drew everyone's ire and was besieged by many supreme masters. But the current situation was far from that. It was pretty obvious that Jianba had not died because he was ganged up on. No matter what kind of Tao they were cultivating here, they all had sharp vision and insight. The one who had killed Jianba was just a single man. Furthermore, Jianba's opponent had killed him so easily that he had even snapped Jianba's sword in two. Even if these supreme masters present here weren't very familiar with Jianba, most of them had fought him at least once in the past. Jianba's sword was his Tao. So, killing someone might not be a big deal, but killing someone while destroying their Tao at the same time was inconceivable. What the supreme masters were concerned about was that they had sensed some unusual fluctuations a while ago. Even when they were far away, those fluctuations were as bright as a match in the darkness. Those were clearly the fluctuations caused by someone breaking through their current cultivation realm. But by the time they arrived here, they didn't see anything. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the faces of Chongjiu and Jianba's companion were filled with a bitterness. Their expressions way worse than eating a bitter pill. Both had witnessed Jianba's death at the hands of Yang Kai, which had shook them to the core. By the time they came back to their senses, the Supreme Masters had already arrived here to investigate after noticing the commotion. As a result, they were unable to leave. If they tried to leave now, they would definitely be forced to stay. The Supreme Masters had been trapped here for far too long, so any unusual movements would definitely attract their attention, let alone a disturbance that exceeded the limits of their current strength. Who was here? Someone suddenly asked. Although it was a random question without a head or tail, the meaning behind it was obvious. The speaker was obviously asking who had witnessed Jianba's death. No one answered. Who arrived here first? Someone asked. Still no answer, but the eyes of the Supreme Masters began to wander across each other, their gazes swiftly changing as they reached a certain unspoken agreement. Finally, everyone's eyes landed on Chongjiu. Chongjiu scowled in anger as he stared at the colleague invited by Jianba. Why are you only looking at me? He was here as well. Although the two were originally on different sides, they clearly had no choice but to band together at this moment. If they didn't handle this situation well, they might become the public enemies of all the Supreme Masters, so they couldn't afford to be careless. There was no escape from this taboo realm. If they became public enemies, things would be hard-pressed for them in the future. Who killed Jianba? An old man with small stature asked. This old man had been trapped in the taboo realm for who knows how many years. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was one of the oldest Supreme Masters in the taboo realm. At least, these 100 or so Supreme Masters present had all come to the taboo realm later than him. It wasn't me, Chongjiu quickly clarified. I'm not that capable. The Supreme Master standing beside him also quickly denied. I didn't kill him either. You were here first, didn't you see who did it? The short old man asked. Although he was the only one who spoke, he represented everyone. Well, Chongjiu hesitated for a moment. He knew that no matter what, he couldn't avoid this matter. Rather than drawing everyone's ire, he might as well speak the truth. After understanding this point, he finally answered, Yang Kai killed him. Who is Yang Kai? The short old man frowned. He had never heard of this name before. He was a newcomer whose Tao strengths had manifested into a river. He arrived about 8,000 years ago, someone explained. The short old man finally understood. I seem to have some impression of him, but how could a newcomer kill Jianba? Where is he? He left, Chongjiu replied. Where did he go? He left from this place. The Supreme Masters were stunned for a moment before staring at Chongjiu in shock. Being the focus of attention of so many Supreme Masters, Chongjiu felt as if an enormous mountain was weighing down on him. The Supreme Master who was standing by his side subtly stepped away from him, drawing a clear line between them. You said, he left this place? The short old man asked. Although his tone remained calm, his heart was in turmoil. Brothers, sisters, there's no need to stare at me like that. He really did leave. This friend and I saw it with our own eyes, Chongjiu stated as he pointed towards the Supreme Master who had just stepped away from him. The man's face darkened, but he knew he couldn't avoid it. All he could do was brace himself and nodded. Yes, he did leave. Chongjiu smiled and said, weren't you all attracted by those strange fluctuations? I'll be frank with you, according to the rumors, there are two ways to leave the taboo realm. And the second method is apparently true. Yang Kai used that method to leave this place. What's more, when he broke through the restrictions here, he seemed to also break through to the next realm, allowing him to kill Jian Ba. Since ancient times, it had been passed down that there were two ways to escape the taboo realm. One was to constantly fight and kill other Supreme Masters. So long as you killed enough Supreme Masters, you would have a chance to leave this place. The second was to have enough people from your original universe remember you and wish for your return. Whether the first method would work or not, no one knew because few people ever died in the taboo realm. But now, the second method had been proven effective. If Chongzhou wasn't lying, Yang Kai had left the taboo realm using this method. Under these circumstances, there was no need for Chongzhou to lie. Everyone was well aware of this. How is that possible? Once we arrive here, the denizens of our worlds would have quickly forgotten about us. Without any memories, how can they remember us? This is simply impossible, someone questioned. Chongzhou spread out his hands and stated, I don't know. In any case, Yang Kai told me a long time ago that his world would never forget him. Perhaps because he saved his universe, the people of that world still remember him? The Supreme Master still found it difficult to accept this, because from ancient times until now, there had never been a precedent of anyone leaving this place. But now, a newcomer who had only entered 8,000 years ago had done just that. This made them envious, but at the same time, they also saw a glimmer of hope. If someone could leave here, it meant that this taboo realm wasn't a prison they couldn't escape from. It was just that they had not found the right way. It was definitely impossible to count on Yang Kai's methods. Not mentioning who knows how his world still remembered him, the main reason was that he had only been here for 8,000 years. The others had simply been here for far too long. Before Yang Kai, the previous Supreme Master to arrive here had done so some 20,000 years ago. After tens of thousands of years, all traces of his existence in his world would have long since vanished. You can get a glimpse of the next realm after breaking the restrictions here? What kind of realm is that? The short old man asked. Chongzhou shook his head. I don't know what realm he reached, but once he broke through, he casually snapped Jian Ba's sword with just 2 fingers. All the Supreme Masters gasped in shock. What those 2 fingers destroyed was not just a sword, but Jian Ba's Tao. One could only imagine what amazing realm Yang Kai must have reached at that instant. Everyone before Yang Kai left, he told me that he will find a way to rescue me. Although I don't know if he would be able to do it. If he does, everyone here will have new hope of finding a way out. Chongzhou threw out another piece of news that excited everyone. In an instant, the expressions of all the Supreme Masters present changed. Half a day later, the Supreme Masters finally dispersed. Chongzhou let out a long sigh and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Although he was also a Supreme Master and didn't fear any individual in the taboo realm, being stared at by hundreds of masters just as strong as him still felt like being stabbed multiple times. If he hadn't thrown those words at the last moment, Chongzhou believed that these guys would have attacked him together and then interrogated him for more information. Even if he had already divulged everything he knew. However, everything was different once he spoke those last words. As long as they still wished to leave the taboo realm, they would not make things difficult for him in the future. In fact, if anyone dared to make things difficult for him, they would become public enemies of this taboo realm. Marshall Peak Chapter 6008 World Creation. An enormous river stretched across the void, its waters fiercely surging, with waves rising and falling one after another. Yang Kai was sitting in a cross-legged position over this enormous river, forming a set of profound hand seals. As his hands moved, the water in the river would cycle through states of agitation and calm. The myriad of Da's strengths would also undulate with the current in the river. It had been several years since Yang Kai returned from the taboo realm. Whenever he recalled his absurd experiences over the past few years, Yang Kai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. On the day when he finally returned from the taboo realm, all his relatives came to meet him tearfully, complaining about their pain of parting. Soon after, everyone returned to the star boundary together, and after learning of the news of his return, all rejoiced. In the 8,000 years after Yang Kai's disappearance, all their memories about him had been erased, but the moment he returned, all the vanished memories were restored. No one knew what extraordinary power could cause something like this. Only Yang Kai seemed to notice something. After that, Yang Kai was placed under house arrest. He, a mighty expert who had surpassed the open heaven realm, who had reached an unprecedented realm never seen before, who could call the wind and rain with just the flip of his hand, had actually been placed under house arrest. The ones who put him under house arrest were none other than Yang Yingfeng and Dong Suzhu. His wives were also under house arrest like him. According to his parents, they were growing old. It was already a miracle that they had been able to give birth to Yang Shui in the past, but there was no way for them to have any more children. So, the responsibility of continuing the Yang family's bloodline fell squarely on Yang Kai's shoulders. The old couple didn't make any outrageous demands, just that he should father as many children as the number of wives he had. So, each of his wives should give birth to at least one child. When this condition had been fulfilled, they would release them. In terms of strength, his parents were naturally not Yang Kai's opponents and he could easily escape if he really wanted to. However, his parents had also said that if their unfilial son dared to disobey them this time, they would bash their heads against High Heaven Peak until they died. Yang Kai was left with no choice. According to his parents, Yang Kai had been cultivating for many years and had explored many worlds, big and small. He had been constantly on the move. But now that the world was at peace and his cultivation had already reached the limit, there was nothing he needed to worry about in this world. As such, he should pay attention to continuing the Yang family's bloodline. Helpless Yang Kai, Su Yan, Yu Meng, and the others were locked up on a lone peak in High Heaven Palace. It wasn't until several years later that Yang Kai walked out of the mountain peak with a tired look on his face, his eyes sunken and his face pale. Right behind him was a large group of beautiful women with big bellies. Yang Yingfeng and Dong Suzhu were overjoyed. As the saying went, people need to be pushed to get results. In the past, they had tried to make Yang Kai continue their bloodline, but he had always brushed them off with all kinds of excuses. If they had known it would be this simple, they would have put him under house arrest long ago. After having completed this vital mission, Yang Kai finally had time to catch up with his old friends. Mi Jingluan and the others were naturally aware of what was going on with Yang Kai over these past few years, so they could not help but tease him when they finally met up. Soon Yang Kai learned about the current situation of the human race from the other Ninth Order Masters. With the end of the war more than 8,000 years ago, the Black Ink clan was completely wiped out, and the universe had finally achieved a state of peace. Now, the human race were the sole rulers of the world. Be that as it may, the scars of countless years of war were difficult to erase. The 3,000 worlds used to be extremely prosperous, but now, apart from those in High Heaven territory and Myriad Monsters territory, the universe worlds in the rest of Great Territories had either been completely corrupted by Black Ink's strength or had long since been destroyed. It could be said that the habitable space for the human race had been greatly reduced. Originally, traces of human activity could be seen in every Great Territory, but now all the surviving humans were gathered in High Heaven territory and Myriad Monsters territory, with more than 90% of them living in the latter. In fact, because of the scarcity of cultivation resources, the two open heaven realm cradles, the Star Boundary and Myriad Monsters world, had essentially been evacuated and cordoned off. The human race didn't dare let too many people live in these two open heaven realm cradles, lest too many good seedlings were born, and there were no resources to nurture them. If the number of people suitable for cultivation increased, but there were no resources for them to cultivate with, fights over cultivation resources would definitely break out, which would ultimately lead to chaos. Currently, the population living on the Star Boundary and Myriad Monsters world was extremely small, and if one wanted to enter these two open heaven realm cradles, they would need to undergo a rigorous series of tests and selections. This was the current state of the human race. They had won the war, but it was a Pyrrhic victory. Nonetheless, they could not do anything about it. The Black Ink clan had simply done too much damage to the 3,000 worlds. In addition, the human race didn't have the means to repair these corrupted universe worlds. If no solution was found, the human race would have many dark days ahead of them. Fortunately, Yang Kai had returned from the taboo realm, and at this moment he was repairing a universe world. This was an uninhabited great territory. Perhaps this great territory once used to be bustling with human activity, with its universe worlds being rich and prosperous. However, after the Black Ink clan occupation, all that was left was deathly silence, and all the universe worlds had died. The massive space-time river stretched across the void, with universe worlds floating up and down in the river, strengths fluctuating rhythmically. The black ink strength that had corrupted these universe worlds was quickly stripped away, and then sent into the profound source gate by Yang Kai to be sealed. After that, Yang Kai evolved yin and yang, then harmonized the 5 elements which gave birth to the 10,000 grand Das. The flow of time in the space-time river was different from the outside world, and with Yang Kai's current cultivation, this flow rate had reached an extremely exaggerated degree. Perhaps 1,000 years were elapsing inside the river for each breath that passed in the outside world. The lifeless universe world slowly regained its vitality in the space-time river. Suddenly, a small figure stepped out and walked over to Yang Kai's side before pursing his lips in frustration. "It's empty outside. There's nothing here, so boring." Yang Kai fiercely turned to him and shot him a glare. "It's all your fault." The figure immediately tried to explain. "What does Mo's evil deeds have to do with this little 11? The small figure standing next to Yang Kai at this moment was none other than Little 11, or rather, it was the same person Yang Kai had seen in the primordial world's Dawn City. 8,000 years ago, Yang Kai defeated Mo and sealed it with the profound source gate. However, as the most ancient being in this universe, even Yang Kai was unable to completely destroy Mo. After all, black ink strength was a power born at the beginning of the universe. As long as the universe still existed, and as long as there was darkness in living beings, black ink strength would never be extinguished. However, Yang Kai spent some effort to extract the consciousness born from this power from the profound source gate. This consciousness was Little 11, who was standing beside him. Strictly speaking, Mo was Little 11, but these two were different. In other words, Little 11 was not making excuses. He was indeed not Mo. During the early ancient era, he had fought alongside the 10 martial ancestors to protect the human race. Only Mu had noticed the problem in Mo at the time. She had set up the primordial heaven source grand restriction, and sealed Mo before its consciousness was completely corrupted. Afterwards, under Mu's secret arrangements, Mo's source was divided into 3,000 pieces and sealed in different universe worlds, while Mu kept Mo's consciousness by her side to guard him. Unlike what Mu did, the current Little 11 was not some weak child in Dawn City who did not even have the strength to strangle a chicken. Otherwise, he would not have been able to wander the void alone. Looking at the surging river stretching across the void before him, Little 11 couldn't help wondering, "Speaking of which, what realm are you in now?" Little 11 was completely unaware of the fact that Yang Kai was trapped in the taboo realm, as Mo was sealed by Yang Kai after his defeat, and Little 11 was freed just a few days ago. However, Little Elvin was surprised to discover that Yang Kai's strength was far greater than the last time Mo fought with him. It seemed to have gone beyond the scope of the open heaven realm. Little 11 reckoned that even if Mo had been at his peak, he would still be no match for the current Yang Kai. "You're supposed to be a master in the creation realm. Can't you see through my cultivation?" Yang Kai asked instead of answering. Little 11 explained, shaking his head, "That's a false claim. Mo never reached the creation realm. He could at most be described as a pseudo-creation realm master. The main reason Mo was able to create the Black Ink clan is because of the unique properties of black ink strength, not because Mo had reached the necessary realm. But you're different. Your current cultivation has indeed exceeded the open heaven realm, so I'm very curious about what realm you've reached." Yang Kai had already noticed that there was something wrong with Mo's creation realm a long time ago, but at that time, his strength and vision were simply insufficient. As such, he was unable to determine anything. Now that Little 11 had personally admitted it, Yang Kai wasn't too surprised. "My realm," Yang Kai muttered before shaking his head. "No one has reached this realm before, so I don't know what it should be called." Saying so, he quickly changed his hand seals before raising them towards the space-time river, making a grabbing motion. The next moment, the enormous river was gripped by Yang Kai, who gently shook it and shouted, "Go!" Immediately after, tiny grains of sand were flung out from the space-time river one after another and began rapidly expanding. Surprisingly, these grains were universe worlds. These universe worlds were the remaining universe worlds of this great territory. Originally, they had been corrupted by black ink strength and were devoid of any life. Some were even destroyed by the Black Ink clan's resource exploitation. But now, all these universe worlds had completely changed. Although there were no sentient beings on them, each of these universe worlds looked completely new, without a trace of black ink strength left on them. The dilapidated universe worlds had been repaired and were filled with perfect grandeur. Furthermore, each of these universe worlds was lush and green, full of life and vigor. These universe worlds were already teeming with vitality, so they would give birth to their first life forms in just a few years. Even with Little Eleven's vast experience, he was still shocked by this amazing sight. The universe worlds were not artifacts, nor were they pieces of furniture. They were not something that could be repaired so easily. However, these devastated universe worlds had been brought back to life by Yang Kai. This was not something a normal human could do. Creating something out of nothing, a divine ability to create a new world truly amazing. Looking at the universe worlds flying out into the void and slowly coming to a stop at certain spots, Little 11 couldn't help but sigh with emotion. He felt that his sins had been significantly reduced. Hearing this, Yang Kai raised his brow as a smile flashed on his face. Then let's call it the world creation realm. Huh. Little 11 was stunned, but quickly recovered and muttered, the world creation realm. It's quite appropriate. In the past, the universe furnace created all worlds, but now Yang Kai's spacetime river was also able to create universe worlds. The spacetime river itself was modeled after the infinite river inside the universe furnace, and the infinite river was the foundation of the entire universe furnace. All the universe worlds in this universe had been created by the infinite river. Yang Kai felt that his own spacetime river would reach the level of the infinite river sooner or later. Let's go to the next place. Yang Kai stood up and rushed towards the adjacent Great Territory, with Little 11 following closely behind him. Marshall Peak Chapter 6009 The Future. Every great territory Yang Kai passed though had its once dead universe worlds now radiating with new vitality. By the time Yang Kai was finished restoring all the great territories in the 3,000 worlds, 1,000 years had already passed. Yang Kai then spent another 1,000 years doing the same thing to the universe worlds in the Black Ink battlefield. After 2,000 years, the entire 3,000 worlds and even the Black Ink battlefield were no longer desolate and barren as they had been in the past. They were once again brimming with endless vitality. In time, these universe worlds would definitely be able to produce new cultivation resources, and the increasing number of humans would slowly become the masters of these universe worlds. Void World was originally Yang Kai's small universe, the crystallization of his life's cultivation, his very foundation, but now he had stripped away his small universe from himself and turned it into a real universe world, placing it in High Heaven territory, next to the star boundary. He did this after he broke through the shackles of the Open Heaven realm and advanced to the World Creation realm. It was quite an incredible feat. Upon learning of this, all the Ninth Order Masters were totally shocked, but considering that it was Yang Kai's handiwork, they were able to accept it. After all, he was the only World Creation realm master in the history of the human race, so any kind of absurd and impossible feat suddenly became perfectly normal for him. At this moment, somewhere on Void World, Yang Kai looked at a child in front of him and exhorted in a serious manner, I'll leave Little 11 in your care. If there are any abnormalities, seal him immediately. I will deal with him when I return. Although the child did not look very old, he spoke in a steady voice like an elder, understood, big brother. This child's appearance bore some resemblance to Feng Tianci. As a matter of fact, he was none other than Feng Tianci. After Yang Kai used the 3-self source reconstitution art to advance to the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm, Feng Tianci and Thunder Shadow lost their physical bodies, but their consciousnesses remained in Yang Kai's knowledge sea, accompanying him for many years. Because of the uniqueness of the 3-self source reconstitution art, while they were Yang Kai's soul clones, they were also independent entities. Over the years, while Yang Kai was repairing the universe worlds, he had also been thinking about how to bring Feng Tianci and Thunder Shadow back to the world of the living. He couldn't possibly allow them to remain in his knowledge sea forever without a flesh body. Reincarnation was certainly a good choice, but in that case, they would most likely lose their original memories and become another unfamiliar soul. After all, it was not the same as when he had cast his secret technique and left many seals on his soul clones, ensuring that his soul clones would grow aware of their mission and memories at the right time. Finally, when Yang Kai decided to strip off his small universe, he was struck with an indigenous idea. That was to integrate Void World Source into Feng Tianci and Thunder Shadow, allowing them to reincarnate along with the world itself. This way, Not only would they be able to retain their original memories, but they would also become the masters of Void World. From then on, they would share the same fate as Void World. If one suffered, all suffered, and if one prospered, all prospered. So long as Void World was not destroyed, they would be immortal. Yonkai's small universe's foundation was extremely strong, and now that they had become this universe world's masters, it would be easier for them to progress in the future. It was easy to foresee that the 3,000 worlds would have 2 more top masters in the near future. Yonkai had also left Little 11 here to be watched over by Fong Tianxi and Thunder Shadow, as it would be grossly inconvenient for him to bring Little 11 along for the rest of his journey. After the child Fong Tianxi responded, a black kitten sitting on his shoulder also nodded and spoke like a human. Meow. Big brother, don't worry. If there's anything wrong with this brat, second brother and I will beat him to death. A look of anguish and frustration appeared on Little 11's face as he rebuked. Don't make me sound like some wicked demon. At least show some basic respect to a senior like me. The kitten immediately let out a snort. Then I'll take my leave. Yonkai nodded before soaring into the sky. The trio's gazes followed after him until Yonkai finally disappeared from their sight. A moment later, the child, Fong Tianxi, and the kitten Thunder Shadow stared at Little 11 together, causing him to frown. What do you want? The kitten shouted, let's beat him up, meow. Having said so, his figure left afterimages as he pounced at Little 11's face, while his pair of cat claws swiped furiously, leaving multiple afterimages. Little 11 cried in surprise, and just as he was about to dodge, the child, Fong Tianxi, threw him on the ground. A moment later, 2 humans and a kitten were lying on the ground with their faces black and blue. Thunder Shadow gasped for breath as he stated, I've wanted to beat you up for a long time now. Satisfying. The child Fong Tianxi did not fare any better. His nose was bleeding, but there was a content smile on his face. Little 11's face was covered in claw marks. He was undoubtedly much stronger than these 2, but this was Void World, and the child Fong Tianxi and Thunder Shadow were the masters of this place. Little 11 was just asking for trouble by being hostile to them, while within the bounds of this universe world. Thus, their fight ultimately ended in both sides being defeated and wounded. Nonetheless, Little 11 stubbornly declared, once I recover, I'll deal with you too. Oh. Outside Void World, when Yonkai arrived in the void, what he saw next took him aback, because there were many familiar faces waiting. Putting aside the group of women led by Su Yan, Yu Ru Meng, and the others, many of the Ninth Order Masters were also here. How did my whereabouts get leaked? Yonkai secretly reflected for a moment, wondering how he gave himself away. All he could say was that his wives understood him too well. Are you planning on going on a long journey? Old ancestor Xiao Xiao looked at him and asked. Yonkai nodded his affirmation. I made a promise to someone. I have to at least try to save him. Inside the taboo realm, Chongzhou was not lying when he said to the many supreme masters that Yonkai vowed to save him. Yonkai had indeed sent him a divine sense transmission just before he left, declaring as much. Chongzhou had helped Yonkai quite a bit during his 8,000 years in the taboo realm. Furthermore, the 2 of them shared the same ideals. If possible, Yonkai wanted to rescue him from the taboo realm, despite the fact that he had no idea where Chongzhou's universe was. This would probably take a lot of time and effort to find, and there was no guarantee his trip would bear any results. Having fallen into the taboo realm, Chongzhou's world had forgotten about him a long time ago. Even if Yonkai found his home, he might not be able to discover any traces of Chongzhou's existence. However, as the saying goes, put forward your best, and leave the rest to the heavens. I also want to find a way to overcome the shackles of the Open Heaven Realm method. The Open Heaven Realm method that the human race was currently cultivating was comprehended by the 10 martial ancestors from the World Tree, and passed down through the ages. The Open Heaven Realm method allowed the human race to gain a foothold in this world, and gave them a chance to become the overlords of this universe. But in the end, this cultivation method was flawed. All cultivators who ascended to the Open Heaven Realm had innate limits imposed on them. Such a cultivation system was obviously imperfect. In the taboo realm, Yonkai had come into contact with many supreme masters from different universes. Each of them had a different cultivation method, but very few of their methods had such obvious shackles as the Open Heaven Realm. As the popular adage goes, stones from other hills may be used to polish one's own jade. So, Yang Kai's purpose of venturing out to explore was firstly to find traces of Chongjiu, and secondly, to study the cultivation systems of other places to see if he could make use of them to improve the open heaven realm method. Since the human race was now thriving and countless universe worlds had been restored, even the originally desolate and dilapidated Black Ink battlefield had regained its vitality. The humans no longer needed to worry about living space and cultivation resources. Yang Kai felt that it was time to shift his attention to future issues. What's more, there was not just his universe in the vast and endless void. Although he had now reached the world creation realm, no one could say with absolute certainty that there were not any existences stronger than him out there. If one day a master from another universe came to invade, their side must have enough strength to protect themselves. This was also a form of preparation for the rainy days. If you can find such a thing, could we break through to the world creation realm? Xiang Shan asked. Probably not, Yang Kai shook his head. He had experienced breaking through to the world creation realm firsthand, so he knew the method to do so and understood it was not something that could be achieved by solving the shackles of the open heaven method realm. Rather, this breakthrough was more about opportunities, luck, and several other conditions. The ideal situation is to allow the current human race to advance through the open heaven realm without being affected by their innate shackles first. Originally, a cultivator who directly ascended to the third order open heaven realm would have an upper limit of the fifth order, but if Yang Kai found a solution to this flaw, then a third order master would not only be able to reach the sixth order in the future, but he would also be able to cultivate to the limit of what he could achieve, perhaps even reaching the ninth order one day. In that case, the human race, with the help of 2 open heaven realm cradles, would be able to give birth to even more 8th order and 9th order masters. If a 9th order master wanted to break through to the world creation realm, they would first need to study the 10,000 Grand Daos. When his or her mastery of the Grand Daos had reached a certain level, they would finally be able to touch the taboo of this world. Finally, if that person could break the restriction of the taboo realm, they would then advance to the world creation realm. Yang Kai had already traversed this path, so if the 9th order masters took this path again in the future, it would be a bit easier and more relaxed than when he had first ventured onto it. That's not a bad idea. Mi Jingluan nodded his acknowledgement. Then I wish you all the best, but we won't be able to provide much help in this matter. You can only count on yourself. With Yang Kai confirming the existence of the world creation realm, the 9th order masters were all diligently cultivating and studying the mysteries of various Grand Daos. Furthermore, with Yang Kai's current cultivation, they would not be able to provide any support to him even if they accompanied him. Yang Kai nodded before turning to his wives. Yu Rumeng stated with a snort, "You can forget about leaving us behind this time." Although the other women didn't say anything, their determined expressions were speaking for themselves. Yang Kai smiled, "Then let's go together." The group of women immediately broke into cheers. They were obviously overjoyed as they had not expected Yang Kai to agree so easily. Immediately, the group of women gathered around Yang Kai, chatting and laughing. "Old tree!" Yang Kai suddenly called out to the void, "Let's go." In response to his call, the world tree's illusory phantom appeared in everyone's field of vision. The towering giant tree was no longer lifeless as it used to be. Rather, it was lush and brimming with vitality. Not only that, but countless world fruits were also hanging from its branches. In the past, Yang Kai had borrowed the world tree's power to travel to the grand ancient ruins boundary from the edge of the universe. This made the old tree consume too much energy and it fell into deep slumber. Only when Yang Kai returned after reaching the world creation realm, and began using his space-time river to repair the universe worlds in the various great territories did the old tree slowly wake from his slumber. The world tree was closely connected to the universe worlds in the 3,000 worlds. Everyone's rise and fall was connected with each other. When the Black Ink clan occupied the 3,000 worlds, the world tree was shrouded in a miasma of gray energy for many years, which left it in a desolate state. As the universe worlds died one after another, the fruits hanging on its branches also began to wither and fall. This caused the old tree to shrivel and grow older. It had to be brought to notice that these world fruits were the embodiments of the vitality of the various universe worlds. If the universe worlds were alive, their corresponding fruits were fresh and alive. If the universe worlds died, their corresponding fruits withered and fell. Apart from the countless universe worlds Yang Kai had repaired over the past few thousand years, he had also placed the 3,000 universe worlds that Mu had left behind in her spacetime river in the various great territories. Not only that, Yang Kai had also restored the universe worlds on the black ink battlefield. In light of this, the old tree's vitality had significantly increased, and the number of fruits hanging from it was more than twice of when it was at its prior peak. In the past, it was impossible for the old tree to manifest its figure outside the grand ancient ruins boundary, but now it could easily do so. Its thick trunk might give off the appearance of an old tree, but it bore no marks to show its age. Rather, it seemed much younger than before. It could be said that ever since Yang Kai began repairing the universe worlds, the old tree's days had become more and more comfortable. Old Tree smiled cheerfully at Yang Kai as it stretched out a branch which wrapped around Yang Kai and the various women, before it gradually started glowing green. By the time the glow faded away, Yang Kai and the others had disappeared. In the grand ancient ruins boundary, when Yang Kai and the others reappeared, the old tree gently withdrew its branches wrapped around them, and then sent over 10 seedlings world tree clones to Yang Kai with another branch. Be careful on your journey, Old Tree advised before prompting its strength, sending Yang Kai and the others out of grand ancient ruins boundary. When they reappeared, they were already standing on the edge of the black ink battlefield. Yang Kai carefully put away the 10 seedlings as they were necessary for his return journey. This would surely be a long and arduous journey, so without the guidance of Old Tree, even a world creation realm master like him might get lost in the endless void. Drawing on his experience the last time he returned from distant lands, Yang Kai had Old Tree prepare some seedlings in advance. This way, when he ventured deep into the vast endless void, he could plant the seedlings on some universe worlds he found and use them to contact the old tree. Furthermore, this would also help in strengthening the old tree's foundation, because the universe worlds with world tree clones planted on them would be included into the old tree's teleportation range. All the universe worlds within this range would be imprinted onto old tree's body, manifesting in the form of world fruits. In all likelihood, the world tree's teleportation range would increase with Yang Kai's exploration. Perhaps after Yang Kai found a new universe, he would be able to connect it to the 3,000 worlds and travel freely between them. Yang Kai summoned a warship, whereupon everyone gathered in the cabin. "Husband, which way should we go?" "Let's go this way." "Alright then, sit tight." "Right, if we're all traveling outside, what about our children? Their grandfather and grandmother are looking after them. There's no need to worry. Also, it's not like they are kids anymore." Father and mother must be very happy with so many grandsons and granddaughters. It's really envious. But they've gotten old, will they be able to look after them? Their uncle and auntie are also looking after them. That brat Yang Xiao, I've only seen him a few times over the years. Pung. Hey, if you want to talk, just talk. Why are you closing the door? I don't care. Big sister has already given birth to 2. But I've only given birth to 1, I want to have another kid too. Husband, you can't be unfair. This isn't something I can decide. Don't tear my clothes, let's talk it out. The end. Martial Peak, Chapter 60. 10 Children. Yangji. Yangsu. Get back here. A man scolded as a pair of dragon and phoenix teleported away. The 2 children, looking to be around 12, giggled as they disappeared. Meanwhile, the man slumped his shoulders in exhaustion. A beautiful woman with luscious lips and phoenix-like eyes appeared from behind him as she sighed. "Yang Xiao, why didn't you just trap them within your domain?" She was none other than Yang Shui, Yang Kai's sister. "You think I didn't want to do that? How in the world did these 2 monsters get born? They sensed it before I could even use time principles and escaped. These twins are such a headache. Even adoptive father has a hard time dealing with them." Yang Xiao lamented, tasked with taking care of them while his adoptive father was having another one of his honeymoons. As their uncle, you should already know how capable they are. Their dragon and phoenix bloodlines are much purer than others. If they could manage to use it to suppress you, that would be a good laugh. Yang Shui teased as she patted him on his head. Yang Xiao felt as though a headache was rushing in. In fact, he could have done something about those 2 if he used a lot more of his strength. It was just these children were too sly. To be more accurate, Yang Su was the cunning one and Yang Ji was the mischievous mastermind. Yang Su would always follow her brother's wishes, and if that meant pranks, that would be. He could not use his full strength because within the compound they were in, there were other children as well. These twins half-siblings, a large number of which were still young and still sleeping. Even when he scolded the two, he had to keep his voice down. If they all woke up and started crying, all hell would truly break loose. Since both the twins and him could not make a scene, what else could he realistically do? Yang Xiao signed once again and complained. Very funny. Well, not like the world can cause them any issues if they go out and run around. Those two schemers just so happen to choose the best time to run away when their grandparents are gone. Yang Shui chuckled. They do resemble you when you were young. Guess that's what it means to be a young dragon? Well, I guess it's best if we tell the others about their escape. What do you mean resemble me when I was young? I was never that naughty. Yang Xiao quipped, snorting at the idea. But aren't you going to go after them? If I go, who is going to deal with the aftermath of when all the children wake up? Yang Shui rolls her eyes at the obvious problem they faced. The two sighed as they stared out to the sky where those twins ran off to. Yay! We finally got out. Yang Ji, in the form of a small golden phoenix, cheered. He looked to his sister to see her checking on the item they took from their uncle. Yang Su, what did you get? Yang Ji asked, curious as to what that orb was. It was completely black, as though light did not reflect from it. Rather, it seemed as though light itself got absorbed by it to never return. Big brother, I don't really know. But I think we can ask Uncle Little 11 about it. Out of everyone, he is the only one we can trust. The rest of them will turn us in and force us back home. Yang Su thought for a while before replying. She had already turned to head towards where Little 11 was. Yang Su nodded and they soon, together, manipulated space principles to instantly close the distance to their destination. Little 11, Fong Tianxi and Thunder Shadow were living quite a distance away from any major cities. In fact, the place they settled on within Void World had been labeled as a restricted zone. Although the whole Black Ink clan mess had been dealt with, there was too much bad blood that could not be washed away. Even if Yang Kai had pardoned Little 11 for his actions, that was not the case for the rest of the world. Even so, the wish of Mu needed to be honored, and Little 11 had to have a chance at normalcy. The best they could do was to keep him out of harm from others who might try to take revenge by setting up this restricted zone. It was not so much that Little 11 could not go out. Rather, it was a restricted zone where he would be safe if inside. Nevertheless, to atone for his mistake as MO, he rather stayed inside. Fong Tianxi and Thunder Shadow, who were tasked to watch over Little 11, naturally stayed by his side. Though they were his observers after growing up together, they had become more or less friends. The occasional fist or claw exchange still happens, but overall they were close. Over the years, Yang Kai had visited them in their homes. Sometimes, he would even bring his children here to shave off some of the trio's boredom. It was on these trips that Yang Su and Yang Ji got to know of their uncles. It was also from these trips that they memorized the location and route. When kilometers outside of the restricted zone, Yang Ji raised his arm to stop his sister. He looked around and checked his surroundings, scrutinizing every detail. Phew. Looks like no one has caught up to us yet. Yang Ji smiled and said, Big brother, I don't think anyone would look for us out here. If they wanted to catch us, they would have waited for us inside. Yang Su said, giving him a side eye. No. We have to play it safe. Look, before we even get close, we need to avoid Uncle Fong Tianxi and Uncle Thunder Shadow's divine sense, right? If they catch on to us, then we'll immediately be sent back. Yang Ji said, convinced that would happen. Then what should we do? I'm pretty sure that their divine sense encompasses the whole restricted zone. I doubt we would be able to sneak past them. Yang Su asked, not understanding her brother's thoughts. Before I answer that, let me ask you, do you think both of us are faster than them? Yang Ji asked, already knowing the answer. If we work together, maybe. We've never really seen them use their full powers before, so I doubt we can beat them in terms of speed. Uncle Fong Tianxi is also proficient in the Tao of space. If we were to compare who had better control, him or us, I doubt we would win, Yang Su said while looking at her small white fist clenching and opening. You're right. Actually, no matter how I see it, I don't think we'll be able to beat either of them. Even Uncle Thunder Shadow is ridiculously fast. So what we need to do is to lure them away. The stratagem known as luring the tiger away from the mountain, Youngji said as he puffed up his chest and beat it. The little boy seemed to have thought that he seemed impressive, but his sister had already thought of this. That's far easier said than done. How are we supposed to lure them away? If one leaves, the other will remain. Young-soo shook her head, believing this to be unfeasible. Youngji placed his index finger on her lips and smirked. There's where you are wrong, my dear sister. You are forgetting that I have a storage ring with me. Youngji said, as though every little detail had already been thought up. Young-soo stood silent and just decided to go with the flow. Marshall Peak Chapter 6011 Trapped. Within the restricted zone, a man, a black panther and a little boy sat around a circular table. It was their usual gathering time, where they would enjoy the simplicities in life. Treats and banters were always abound during these gatherings, gathered at the center for whoever wants to take them. Hey, the communication artifact had lit up. What did it say? The little boy asked in wonder. It was obvious that something must have happened for the usual stoic man to suddenly sigh. Feng Tianxi sighed again. It's Big Brother's children. 2 of them seem to have escaped from home while their parents are on a honeymoon. Thunder Shadow tilted his head. Wait, they are going on a honeymoon again? Feng Tianxi scratched his face. With so many wives, Big Brother does have it rough. Besides, they are most likely not just playing around. They are most likely looking around for materials to build the artifact Big Brother wants. The one he is going to use for that long voyage? Little 11 asked while in deep thought. Yeah, the trip definitely won't be easy, but not like there's much we can do about it. Judging from the description of those people he had to deal with, and the taboo realm, it's best to prepare. Feng Tianxi added. He considered joining his big brother, but his priority was to remain by little 11's side. At the same time, all 3 of them would feel uneasy if they all left the 3,000 worlds. Thus, at one of their gatherings, they had already discussed and decided Feng Tianxi and Thunder Shadow would be staying to guard the 3,000 worlds just in case. Naturally, little 11 was also present at the scene during these discussions. He had made the active decision to remain here, as this was Mu's final resting place. It was also the least he could do for terrorizing the 3,000 worlds for so long. At this time, all 3 sensed 2 familiar auras. They all immediately looked at each other and 2 pairs of eyes fell on Feng Tianxi. All right, I'll go. Feng Tianxi stood up and leaped, disappearing in an instant. Little 11 and Thunder Shadow both shrugged. They both nodded as though it was the expected outcome. After all, little 11 needed to stay within the restricted zone. As for Thunder Shadow, although he was fast, he by no means could hope to beat his second brother. It was naturally by no means that they just wanted to watch the show. Certainly not. Youngji and Young-soo could both sense a disturbance in space. They immediately threw out one of the artifacts that Youngji had brought with him. It was an array plate. The array plate landed on the space that started to ripple, and it immediately activated. The area it captured was so large that it encompassed at least 10 kilometers. Naturally, that meant whoever was going to appear and the 2 children would get caught up in this trap at the same time. Youngji immediately grabbed hold of Young-soo's hand, and they flew. He took out a token and they immediately escaped from the array. The array plate was made specially to contain whatever was inside. However, it was far from simple. It was made by Grandmaster Ma Fan and Yang Kai. This was a gift to the twins, whereby they would be able to train in. It would create an independent space, whereby the twins would be able to go through different illusionary environments. There were places with sweltering lava pools, there were canyons with astral winds, there were caves of freezing ice. Regardless, even till now the 2 had not cleared all regions. Still, this array plate functioned as both a training ground and a means of protection. They could trap their enemies inside and leave them there while they escaped. As for the 2, they naturally had a token to escape the array plate. When Youngji and Young-soo got out, they looked at each other. They both knew that with Feng Tianxi's abilities, escaping this array was only a matter of time. Still, they could not help but smile since they've trapped him. They both gave each other a high five and Youngji said, "Okay, that's one down." I don't think Uncle Thunder Shadow will come out anytime soon though. So we need to just continue onwards. Let's do this as planned. We need to get past the restriction array first. Okay. Yang-Su nodded and took out another token. This time it was a token for the restriction array. In general, this was a special identification token. It could be for the various arrays around Void World. Naturally, this restriction array was no exception, since most of the Yang family would come here from time to time. The two children took out their identification token and placed it against the restriction array. The typically transparent dome suddenly had some blue hue to it. A small hole soon appeared and it quickly enlarged till the side of 3 men. The two children went in with little regard for the array plate they left behind. The path to the center was straightforward. In fact, a small path within this dense forest would light up in front of them to guide them. This path was not real. It was an illusion created with some board modification made by Little 11. The path was created such that glowing rectangles were painted on the ground. Little 11 even took the effort to make them always perfectly contour the ground, to make it seem as though the ground had been painted over. Any shrubs protruding would be circled, as though they should be watched out for. Yang-Ji and Yang-Su did not understand how such a thing was made, but that was just what made Uncle 11 more impressive in their hearts. The two continue forward as guided by the path. To say the scenery here was picturesque would be an understatement. With how much time they had, Feng Tianxi, Thunder Shadow and Little 11 would decorate their surroundings. It was not an exaggeration to say that everything here had been made. Since, regardless if a blade of grass or dirt had been here, they would have been moved or replaced by any of the three at some point in time. In fact, a common topic of their discussions, if not about cultivation and news, was about their place. Looking at such sites again, with certain mountains having changed location and certain trees being replaced by another breed, Yang-Ji and Yang-Su had their gazes taken. However, as they moved closer to the center, they remembered what they needed to do and they ceased getting distracted. There they saw a black panther and a little boy, who looked to be around their age, who they call Uncle. Marshall Peak Chapter 60-12. Leaving the restricted zone. When the twins could be spotted, the two on the table just minded their own business. They had already sensed them before they entered. Naturally, their presence came as no surprise. Thunder Shadow even lazily opened one of his eyes to peek, almost intent on not doing anything. As for Little 11, he waved at the twins to welcome them over. For him, who had always been close to the two, this was a great time to catch up. Yang-Ji could not help but look at Yang-Su before turning his head back at the two by the table. He was a little taken aback by Thunder Shadow's nonchalance. He had imagined they needed to do something to stop their capture. However, it turned out that nothing really needed to be done. As for Yang-Su, she half predicted this outcome. She never believed that Feng Tianxi had any true intention of catching up. In fact, she wanted to question her brother why he had to go this far. Was it not more entertaining to just play along? Seeing that Yang-Ji was not planning to move, Yang-Su took the initiative to take his hand and bring him forward. The two slowly walked up to the table, where Little 11 asked, "Hey, what are you two doing here?" Thunder Shadow seemed to completely ignore these two. Instead, his attention was fully focused on the outside, as though he was waiting for Feng Tianxi to get out of his predicament. Yang-Su was the one who answered. "We got this from back home. We were wondering what this is." Yang-Ji immediately took the initiative to take out the black orb. His hands were still a little shaky due to nervousness. The moment Little 11 saw the orb, his eyes lit up. He immediately took it into his small hands and smirked. He asked, "Do you have any guess as to what this is?" The twins looked at each other and then back at him to only shake their heads. "If we knew, why would we need to come and look for you?" Little 11's smile widened as though he had won. He moved his arms around the two and whispered, "This is a really fun toy that you've brought. I can't believe that you've managed to get a hold of this." The twins' eyes brightened with expectation. They could not wait for him to tell them already. However, before they could push Little 11 for an answer, he pushed the topic aside to further agitate them. "Okay, how about we deal with this later? For now, let's get those two killjoys out of the picture first." Once he said that, the space around him seemed to darken. Even Thunder Shadow was alarmed by this development. Before Thunder Shadow could act, his body was engulfed in darkness. Sticky darkness that he felt his limbs could not maneuver through. He raged, annoyed that this prankster got the best of him. When did you? Damn it. A playful voice could be heard from above. You don't have to get so mad. You've done worse to me and we are all still such best of friends, no? I'll take care of the kids for a while. Not to worry. I'll bring them back. Friends? You call us friends? Thunder Shadow roared, but his voice seemed to have gone unheard. Seeming as though Little 11 had disappeared, he scoffed. Out of all the techniques you could have used, you had to use Abyssal Dome. Do you plan to keep me locked up here until you get back? Abyssal Dome was a secret technique Little 11 had developed to keep Feng Tianxi and Thunder Shadow confined in one space. It worked to a certain extent against Feng Tianxi, but it worked too well against Thunder Shadow. The last time Little 11 used it on Thunder Shadow, the latter could not come out until he started begging. Seeing this secret technique again just poured salt into his wounds. Thankfully, crack. After a few minutes had passed, a crack started to form at the top of the dome. It slowly became like a spider web spreading out. Not wasting a single second, Thunder Shadow rushed out, crashing his head against the weak spot, causing the whole thing to collapse. The sight before him came as no surprise. It was Feng Tianxi, who was already waiting with folded arms. The two stared at each other in silence for a while. It was Thunder Shadow who took the initiative to speak. Why did you not catch them when you were just loitering around? Feng Tianxi simply looked at the direction where the twins and Little 11 had run off to. He shook his head and sighed. Just let them be. The thing those two took is something that was meant for Little 11 in the first place. If you're so worried, we could just go and follow them in secret. Thunder Shadow scoffed and then asked, but they might leave the restricted zone. You know? Aren't we supposed to keep an eye on Little 11 and ensure that he does not leave? After being with him for so long, we both know that he had no desire to cause harm to any of us. In the first place, this restricted zone is more of keeping the others out than keeping him in. It's fine. I'm actually more interested to see what they plan on doing with that orb. Besides, weren't you the one who tried to persuade him to go out to play? Feng Tianxi sighed as he mounted on top of Thunder Shadow, as if it were natural. Thunder Shadow knew about the artifact. However, he felt it to be strange. There was no need for Little 11 to leave the restricted zone to use it, much less bring the children along with him. He wanted to ask Feng Tianxi about his guess as to why this was the case. However, seeing Feng Tianxi having no intent of explaining, Thunder Shadow just followed along and started moving. The moment he took his first step, space was split and a void crack appeared. The two, Panther and Human, soon entered. Little 11 was quick to bring Yangji and Yangsu out of the restricted zone. It was as if nothing hindered him anymore. Instead of bringing them in any other direction, he brought them to where the twins had supposedly trapped Feng Tianxi. The array that had been established from the array plate had already been broken through. There was a huge hole at the top which was slowly closing up. When Yangji saw the initial destruction, his heart had dropped. If his array plate got destroyed, who knew what kind of punishment awaited him? His spirit only got lifted after he realized that the array plate had a self-repairing function. Little 11 was quick to point at the array as he said, "Hurry up and keep your toy." Yangji and Yangsu looked at him in wonder. They had not seen him in such a hurry before. It was certainly a rare sight to see. They did as they were told. The array token was fished out, allowing for easy access into and through the array. These two quickly went back into the core of the array and shut it down. When the array disappeared with the two children exposed to the outside world, Little 11 immediately appeared beside them. He moved his arm to wrap them in his shoulders, and they soon disappeared. On the group where they had stood, a small text was carved into the ground, heading to the World Tree. Martial Peak Chapter 60 13 Glimpses. In front of Yangji and Yangsu's eyes, space seemed to warp. From what they knew, it was not so much the application of space principles but something far more profound. It was not that they moved through the void. Rather, space itself seemed to have folded, and they arrived at a large open area. This large open area was not an unfamiliar place. They have been here before. Typically, if they wished to travel to distant worlds, Their father would bring them here first. As per their memories, there was a gigantic tree at the center of the area. On its branches were what seemed to be fruits. With their current mastery over the Tao of space and the Tao of time, they could vaguely feel that these fruits were far from ordinary. They seemed to have an explicit connection to some kind of distant place. Little 11 walked up to the large tree and asked while displaying the black orb in his hand. "Old tree, long time no see." The old tree, which was withered, frail and aged, had seemed to have its life completely turned around, since its vitality was linked to the universe worlds connected to it. Once Yang Kai started repairing the damages caused by the Black Ink clan, the world tree had gotten a new lease in life. Not as lethargic as before, the old tree responded, a little wary. "I don't think that we've met for quite a long time. I believe the last time was establishing an alternative route to transport to me without using my clones. What is it this time?" Little 11, Fong Tianxi and Thunder Shadow had visited the world tree before. While Fong Tianxi and Thunder Shadow seeked it out to find an alternative to reach the Ninth Order, Little 11 was different. He wanted to find a way to transport others to the world tree without needing Yang Kai to ferry them around. This alternative method had some requirements, namely, a third party without a world tree clone would be able to use it. He also did not want the world tree to be able to constantly spy on them through this connection. While Fong Tianxi and Thunder Shadow found no luck in cracking through the Ninth Order barrier, Little 11 had made great strides. It was just that he needed some sacrifices from the world tree. In short, he needed parts from the world tree. The world tree was initially unwilling to participate in this. After all, it had no real relationship with Little 11. In fact, they should have bad blood against each other. However, with Yang Kai, Fong Tianxi and Thunder Shadow's encouragement, it eventually relented. It understood that Yang Kai was going to leave eventually, and a method to move around through connected universe worlds would be invaluable for others, especially those close to him. Knowing that this would benefit its savior, and knowing that it still had the discretion of who to send and where, the world tree eventually caved. Little did the world tree know Little 11 at that time was a complete beginner at artifact refining and arrays. Little 11 definitely had help, and he progressed very quickly thanks to that. However, the amount of parts the world tree had to sacrifice would make even a grown man weep. Seeing this boy again, who treated his own body as mere ingredients, the world tree could not help but be wary. It was just instinctual at this point. "I know you don't really like me. I understand that we haven't gotten along on the best of terms, but I do need your help in this. I need to get to where that Heaven's Order girl is. I'm also bringing these two kids along with me," Little 11 said and pushed the twins beside him to the front. The world tree looked at the twins and recognized them. He asked, curious, "These two are Yang Kai's children, are they not? Why are you bringing them all the way here? You're even going as far as to bring them so far out. Although they are divine spirits, they are not strong enough to go out there just yet." Little 11 took out the black orb and held it up high for the world tree. "They were the ones who brought this to me. So, I believe that they have the right to see what lies beyond. Besides, these kids will most likely get agitated if I take what they have passed on to me and just disappear." The world tree initially could not tell what that orb was at first sight. It had to stare for at least a couple of seconds to understand what it was. This orb was like the antithesis of light. It would absorb all the light around it. Could feel a faint connection to this orb. It was similar to the artifact Little 11 wanted to refine. Just that this was not an artifact for transportation. The world tree could sense that one of its clones was inside, but the connection was really faint. It was as though there was something profound blocking all connections into whatever was inside the orb. The world tree pondered over it for a moment and its eyes widened with shock. It could not help but ask, "Are you certain you want to go through with this? There may be no return. What's more, you want to bring two innocent children along with you. What if something goes wrong?" Little 11 added, "That's why I'm bringing them to her, right? Anyways, I don't think they visited her before. It'll be fine. Yang Kai had already given me his word." The world tree, not having heard about this from Yang Kai, doubted Little 11's words. It closed its eyes for a moment before opening them up again. "All right. I've just asked. Yang Kai has given me his word that everything will be fine. If so, then I'll allow you passage to the chaotic dead territory," the world tree said and tried to sense nearby universe worlds. When it spotted one, it gave a perplexed look. You're fortunate that the person you are seeking is in a universe world at the moment. The World Tree added, thinking that it was strange for the chaotic dead territory to have a universe world inside of it. The other closest one would take a few days to reach the edge of the chaotic dead territory. Fortunate, huh? Little 11 muttered as he looked at those two children in front of him. It was obvious that they were lost as to what was going on. However, explaining it all now would ruin the surprise. The World Tree sighed and waved a branch. A portal soon opened behind the trio. However, before they turned, the World Tree tossed out 3 seedlings, one to each person. It added, none of us can afford it if something were to go wrong. Take these just in case. Little 11 bowed. He noticed that the twins were quite proactive in this regard, and they also followed him to bow. They took the seedlings with both hands and walked away. As they drifted a distance, and the portal started to close, another opened up behind theirs. Chapter 6014 Chaotic Dead Territory. For Yangji and Yangsu, the whole thing had been a blur. One moment they were in the restricted zone, the next they were meeting with the World Tree, and finally, a place where the skies were devoid of anything. If anything, the twins found the place called Chaotic Dead Territory to be frightening. They had never heard of a place where there were no celestial bodies, except for the thing under their feet. This place felt no different to an abandoned land. Worst, there were powerful and bright yellow and blue flashes in the sky. It was only thanks to Little 11's presence that they could remain calm. It was also fortunate for them that within 5 minutes of travel, they already spotted a small hut. Its exterior was completely plain, as though the owner had no conscious thoughts about luxury and only enjoyed the simplicities of life. Except for a simple garden, and a table and a few chairs set up outside, there was nothing else. A woman could be seen tending to her garden, seeming to be unconcerned about the flashes in the sky. She looked young and had a graceful appearance. She was a beauty, certainly, but in the eyes of Yangji and Yangsu, who had so many world-destroying beauties as mothers, she would not be considered to be anything that special. Other than her appearance, the twins could sense that her cultivation was unfathomable. They could not tell her cultivation realm, but they knew that this one woman was stronger than any of their mothers. They immediately knew this woman must be the Heaven's Order girl Little 11 was referring to. She was such a powerful woman, yet, the moment they approached, they could clearly see her stop whatever she was doing to go up to them and bowed. The twins' immediate reaction was to look at Little 11. After all, they had never met this woman before, and would not deserve such honors. However, when they saw Little 11's fierce reaction of shaking his head, they got even more confused. That was until Zhang Ruoshi greeted, "Young master, young mistress, I welcome you two to my humble abode. I believe this is the first time we are meeting. I'm Zhang Ruoshi, your father's maid. To what do I owe the pleasure of your visit?" The twins looked at each other and glared at Little 11, as though questioning, like I know. Little 11 gave a light cough and quickly took out the orb. He showed it to Zhang Ruoshi and stated, "We are here for this." Zhang Ruoshi's eyes seemed to shine with a perturbed glimmer as she looked at the two young children in front of her. She checked their cultivation and was astonished. In them hide a ton of secrets that were more than meets the eye. These two were divine spirits, but were already equivalent to Tao Source Realm Masters. If they were monster beasts, they would be regarded as 11th order monster beasts. Furthermore, these two both had divine spirit sources, and not just ordinary divine spirit sources. They both had sources that seemed to be greater than the ancestral level, which should have been impossible. It had to be noted that Yang Kai's ancestral dragon source was from a dragon that had reached the pinnacle of known cultivation before the world creation realm was achieved by him. For these two to have sources that were greater than that meant only one thing: their existence was on par with her Heaven's Order bloodline. In other words, when she was still at her peak, her Heaven's Order bloodline would have no suppressive effects on them at all. It was frightening to know that these two were merely around 12. Still, it might be reasonable as these two were the result of a union between a 9th order phoenix and a world creation realm dragon, a never-seen-before combination. Although Zhang Ruoshi could roughly gauge how strong they were, she could not really say that these kids fell into any of the normal categories in terms of cultivation realms. The strangest thing about these two was that their cultivation did not over-rely on their natural-born divine spirit source. It was some other technique that was too complex for her to grasp. The one thing she knew was that there was a harmonious link between the twins, whereby both basically have the same aura. Still, for what little 11 wants to do, Zhang Ruoxi still felt that bringing along 2 children only around the Dao Source realm would be too dangerous. She wanted to warn him, but before she could do so, the flashes in the sky ceased and 2 figures rushed towards them. Naturally, these 2 figures were Sun's burning light and Moon's serene glimmer. They had come down after their round had ended. Moon's serene glimmer had a beam on her face while Sun's burning light was downcast, obviously highlighting who had won. These 2 had naturally sensed the visitors when they had arrived, especially the one which they attested. Still, seeing that there were 2 kids here, they held back their ire. Especially since the 2 kids had even taken a few steps back once they had arrived. To be fair, Yang Ji and Yang Su did not take a step back because the 2 had imposing appearances. It was more to do with their unconstrained aura that seemed to be constantly lashing out in the air. If it was not for that, they would be more than willing to befriend these other 2 kids. You 2 are scaring them. Try restraining your aura some more. If not, best to just merge with me so that you can remain here. Zhang Ruoxi said as she sighed. Although they had been working hard on controlling their powers, Sun's burning light and Moon's serene glimmer still could not fully do so on their own at all times. Ah! Sun's burning light and Moon's serene glimmer exclaimed as though this thought had finally hit them. To be fair, they hardly had guests, and of the few, most would bear with it. If they were fearful, they would try their best to hide it. The duo tried their best to contain as much of their power inside of them. Although it was difficult, after so many years of practice and with Zhang Ruoxi's help, they could at least manage to maintain this state for an hour. Once they did so, the 2 quickly approached the twins. Sun's burning light immediately went to Yang Ji and Moon's serene glimmer to Yang Su. The 2 of them inspected the one in front of them like they were looking at a rare animal. Naturally, this drew the ire of the twins and they snapped back. Are you done looking? Has no one told you, you ought to respect your seniors? Chapter 60 15 Sun and Moon Marks. Seniors? Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light looked at each other with wide eyes. Their gaze naturally fell on little 11, who had both his hands against his mouth, hiding his smirk. They respectively pulled Yang Ji and Yang Su's ear as they roared. You're the juniors. The aura those 2 exuded was one in which no question could be asked. They completely dominated the conversation, as they stared daggers at little 11. Initially, the twins tried to struggle, but it was fruitless. The strength difference was just that vast. Worse, their ears really started to hurt. Zhang Ruoxi could not bear this sight anymore and interjected. Enough. Let those 2 go. They might have been rude, but you 2 haven't properly presented yourselves as seniors. Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light pouted and they both argued. But, no buts. If you want to be treated as seniors, you must act like seniors. Zhang Ruoxi added as she pulled on both their ears. Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light both let go. They put up a struggle as well, but their struggle seemed weak. As though they were just putting on a show of reluctance rather than actually struggling. Yang Ji and Yang Su both rubbed their ears and glared at Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light. Meanwhile, little 11 was just enjoying the show. Truth be told, little 11 did not hate the 2. It was just a natural instinct to dislike them just like how they disliked him. It had nothing to do with their personality. In fact, if they had to spend 1,000,000 years together, he was certain he would still dislike them. Both Zhang Ruoxi and little 11 were aware of this. The only ones who most likely had not noticed were Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light themselves. It was like how their actions towards Zhang Ruoxi were instinctually so amicable. Zhang Ruoxi would like to lecture the 2, but she did not wish to waste any more time. It was best for little 11 and these 2 to be separated as soon as possible. Keeping them in the same space was just asking for trouble. They'll be gone soon enough, so don't cause any more trouble. They are here for the profound source gate. Zhang Ruoxi placated. The profound source gate? Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light both questioned as they turned to little 11, who was holding the orb in hand. They both showed looks of disgust at the idea. As for Yang Ji and Yang Su, they both tilted their heads. This was the first time they were hearing about this. Yang Su looked at her brother, but he could only shrug his shoulders and point to little 11. Little 11 walked forward and explained to the two. Let me explain. Your father had helped me seal my home inside of this orb. I describe it as home, since that's where I'm from. But things are not that simple. Before I met your father, I was a monster who could not control my powers. I was consumed by it. Right now, most of my powers are basically being sealed inside of my home. I wish to regain some of my powers, and for that, I would need your help. Little 11 explained in the most concise way he could think of. The twins looked at each other, confused. After all, why would he need them out of everyone? Surely, their father would be able to help. As if he had seen through their thoughts, Little 11 continued, We've tried already, your father and I have entered before. But it did not work. My powers were not there. It was scared away by your father. We've tried it a few times before with different people. I've even tried going back with those two. Little 11 pointed to the two other children who still had their ears gripped. Overall, we have tried those that are powerful enough to not get corrupted by my powers. It is too risky to take anyone else. But you two have a special constitution that would prevent you from getting corrupted by my powers. Your power can run away. Yangji and Yangsu had never heard of such an absurd thing before. Nevertheless, since it was their Uncle 11 saying it, it must be true. Still, it was hard to believe. The twins soon heard a woman interject. It's not confirmed that you two will not get corrupted. It's only a guess. Zhang Ruoxi added. She was opposed to this plan. She believed it was too risky. Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light finally had their ears released as they added, Exactly. There is no telling what might happen if you two go in. You shouldn't bring them in. Little 11 shook his head. I know this is risky, but I cannot go in by myself. I have a high chance of being corrupted. Without these two, I can't think of any other candidate that can join me. Right now, they would not be deemed as a threat. If we wait any longer, when they reach the open heaven realm, it might be too late. So this is the only time. Besides, this is the only time where their mothers are away. Little 11 wanted to add that in but refrained from doing so, saying that would only serve to have Zhang Ruoxi more adamant on refusing to cooperate. Zhang Ruoxi proposed, There is no need to do it now. We can wait till they are older. Their cultivation has not even reached the Emperor realm. We can wait till then. Little 11 remained adamant. There would be no difference between now and later. They cannot be corrupted by black ink strength. This is a fact. If you don't believe me, let those two test them. Zhang Ruoxi hesitated for a moment, but as though curiosity got the better of Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light, they just went up to the twins. They both forcibly grabbed the other's hand and laid down their sun mark and moon mark. Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light felt strange. This was the first time that they felt their marks only needed to be placed on different individuals. Typically, a person would require a pair of marks to fully utilize its powers. However, Yangji and Yangsu only needed one mark each. Yangji had the sun mark while Yangsu had the moon mark. With one mark on each child, they already seem complete. Chapter 60:16 Preparations complete. Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light looked at each other, confused. This has certainly never happened before. With the marks on them, Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light realized the intricacies of their powers. Though all of their heritage could be said to have originated from the primordial light, these two were slightly different. They definitely had the identity of being divine spirits, and their connection to the primordial light, along with connection to Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light, were unquestionable. However, their existence was at the same time out of the sphere of influence of the primordial light. In other words, the twins could obtain the sun and moon marks due to their connection. However, sun and moon marks would have no real influence on them. Their existence has in essence exceeded the marks, and their cultivation would not grow or improve from the marks. There was no bloodline to purity, nor divine spirit source to strengthen. In fact, the sun and moon marks were to the twins no different from just tools. It might really be the case where the black ink strength could not affect them, since even power close to the primordial light did not affect them. Naturally, for Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light, their minds had never developed to go so deep. It was just like Little 11 had said, they tested the twins and they had instinctively felt the two to be incorruptible. After all, they could not influence these two. How could black ink strength possibly do so? They refused to accept it. Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light looked at each other and gave a nod. They acted like the great seniors they were. Yes, very powerful. About to reach our level. Yes, about to reach our level. Little 11 had to open his lips to help Zhang Ruoxi confirm. After all, if these two started acting, it would take an eternity to get things done. So, they won't be influenced by black ink strength, right? Yeah. Won't. The two answers simultaneously. Little 11 turned to Zhang Ruoxi and added, "There you have it. All three of us have basically reached the same conclusion. I understand that you are worried for them, but I can assure you that they will be absolutely safe. I can even swear to heaven." Zhang Ruoxi sighed and relented. She believed that if there was really something to worry about, Yang Kai would have done something beforehand. These were his two children after all. He must have a certain level of confidence in this plan to allow the situation to evolve to this. All right. I understand. So we just have to prepare as usual, right? Zhang Ruoxi said as she used her hand to signal to Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light to get ready. The two split away and appeared behind Zhang Ruoxi before they left. Since this was not the first time they've tried to do this, they were pretty familiar with the procedure. Previously, besides Yang Kai, others like Feng Tianxi and Thunder Shadow had tried to go in with Little 11. Naturally, they had a world tree clone inside of their small universe to protect themselves before they attempted this. Zhang Ruoxi had led the way, and Little 11 had led the twins to follow along. While walking, Little 11 explained to them later, inside of the profound source gate, you will need to stick close to me. Never wander too far away. It'll be pitch black inside, and the other me might attack us. Other you? Yang Ji asked. Yes, you can think of him as my evil twin brother. You can sort of say that all the bad things I did was because of him, but I would still like to claim responsibility for my failure to stop him. Little 11 said with a heavy heart. If Mu was here, she would definitely say that it was not his fault. However, it was a fact that his own inability to control his powers had led to so many years of tragedy. Uncle, then what would you like to do with your twin brother? This time it was Yang Su that asked. Well, we were originally one. I wish to be able to get back to that state. Little 11 replied. So you're getting remarried to your brother? Yang Su asked with a twinkle in her eye. Cough. Little 11 scratched his head and tried his best to come up with an easy-to-understand response. No, merging would be the more accurate term. In the past, I could not control my powers and it ran amok. It has essentially become another person. So, I'm just trying to take back control over my powers. When inside, you will see me trying to absorb it. It will resist, maybe attack, maybe try to flood into me to erase my consciousness. I would need you to protect me. Can you do that for me? And the twins responded in unison. Little 11 further elaborated on what they needed to do while inside, and the twins listened so attentively that their tutors would be envious. The lecture took quite a while until they reached an open area with clear arrays on the ground. In the middle was a dent with markings around it and spreading out from it. Mountains, rivers, trees, stones, structures all seemed to be in harmony as a complex network of nested arrays were abound. Although it was not something viewable from the ground, the whole universe world had in fact been made into an array. The purpose was twofold, to prevent this universe world from breaking apart while Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light played, and to prevent any hazards from escaping if something were to go wrong. In fact, the reason why this whole venture had been done in the chaotic dead territory was to limit the risk of another outbreak of black ink strength. After all, Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light were here. Even if they could not ultimately stop black ink strength from spreading, they would be able to buy enough time for Yang Kai to come and secure the area. Chapter 60-17 Descend into the Orb. Little 11 looked around in remembrance, while the twins stared at the patterns on the ground and structures. If they were to describe their feelings towards this array, it would be overbearing. Even their own home and the restricted zone did not have such dense array patterns. The weight of everything seemed to really hit them at this moment, as they felt the invisible pressure of the expectation from what they were about to do. After all, words to describe were incomparable from first-hand experience in going up on stage. The amount of effort it took to build this stage was incalculable. For arrays, every detail had to be taken note of, and these were nested arrays. Though the twins did not know the whole universe world had been made into an array, just from seeing the distant mountains and rivers having such intricate patterns, they now knew how critical this was. Unconsciously, their hands slowly moved to hold each other. Little 11 took out the orb as though displaying it. He pointed to the dent in the middle and started to explain. Before I place it there, do note that your safety is of utmost importance. If something awful happens past the point of what you feel is safe, retreat. It was at this time Zhang Ruoxi moved towards them with 2 space rings. As though continuing from where little 11 left off, these are 2 space rings that are vital. Do put them on and make sure you do not lose them under any circumstances. Inside are yin and yang crystals. Blue crystals for yin and yellow crystals for yang. There is also a token in each ring. Break it to immediately leave the place. Yang Ji and Yang Su accepted the ring with both hands. They used their divine sense to check through the contents and were astonished to find mountains upon mountains of blue and yellow crystals. There were other items like pills and artifacts as well, but the second most eye-catching thing inside the ring was definitely the token with a return written on it. Compared to the rest, this token had an overt aura of someone familiar. Someone who the twins often joked as Grandmaster Trouble, Ma Fan. The twins looked at each other, and without a word they swapped rings. They each compared what they got and nodded before putting the ring on. Once they wore it, the band of the rings seemed to tighten as to perfectly fit their fingers. Yang Ji looked at little 11 and asked, Uncle 11, why don't you also get a space ring? Little 11 chuckled and explained how he had gone on this trip so many times that he had already prepared what he needed, that they should not worry about him. Zhang Ruoxi just shook her head and proceeded to instruct. Before you go in, let me brief you on another artifact you need to take note of. Zhang Ruoxi took out something that seemed to look like a lantern. However, the artifact was not fueled with charcoal. Rather, it required the use of blue and yellow crystals. From what the twins could see, the area it lit up was considerable enough, around 100-meter radius. The rate of consumption was also not too fast, with them needing to replace the crystals inside every 4 hours or so. Zhang Ruoxi continued to explain about each artifact in detail within the ring, about the other use of the crystals, as though this was the only way she could soothe her worries. Nevertheless, the time had come and nothing else needed to be said. That's about everything. You understand everything, right? Zhang Ruoxi asked, to which the twins replied with a firm nod. Naturally, Zhang Ruoxi knew that with their cultivation, everything that was said were all remembered. She just could not help herself from asking. Little 11 stepped in and signaled for the twins to come closer. He was already standing on the circular platform with a dent in it. Okay, I think we've already gone through everything. Yang Ji, Yang Su, come here and stand within this circle. Knowing there was nothing else she could do, Zhang Ruoxi sighed and took a few steps back. Meanwhile, the twins followed their uncle's instructions and stepped into the same circular platform as him. Once they were within it, little 11 asked in confirmation. Ready? In. The twins held each other's hand as they gave a firm nod. Little 11 soon placed the orb in the dent and the whole universe world seemed to tremble. The patterns all around them started glowing, and the structure beneath their feet began to drop down. The whole circular area had begun to sink into the ground. When Yang Ji and Yang Su looked at their surroundings in astonishment, they saw the whole mountains and rivers start to glow with countless mysterious patterns being lit up. Finally, their eyes laid on the 3 not in the circle, who waved their hands for a farewell. They could see Zhang Ruoxi being reluctant. As for Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light, who had been playful this whole time, they wore solemn expressions. That was the last scene they saw of the outside world as the circular platform beneath their feet quickened in its descent. Over the course of the next few seconds, the hole above their heads, leading to the sky, got as small as an apple. Eventually, even the sky could not be seen anymore as the exit got covered, with the only light source being the glowing patterns of the array of the walls and floor. They could even hear the sounds of what seemed to be multiple gates above them being closed, with this sound being continuously played and getting closer. At some point, little 11 spoke up. Maybe due to his own emotions, or maybe due to seeing how the kids were so tense that they did not speak. I have to thank you too for this. Honestly, I doubt any other person could accompany me on this journey. For the 2 of you, you need not worry too much. I'll handle everything. Even though little 11 said such words, The twins were not fools. If he could truly handle everything, then what were they here for? They obviously had a special role in the grand scheme of things. They were just worried they would mess up. Young-soo, the more tactful one, was the first one to answer with a nod. And Young-ji also gave a nod as a follow-up. Not too long, the walls and everything seemed to start to get brighter, and in a flash the whole space they were in had changed. Sullivan, I feel like I've dragged the prep work for too long. I can't help but feel like they need this much prep work done though. Well, in the next chapter we'll be inside the profound source gate. Chapter 60:18 Try touching. The next moment Young-ji and Young-soo opened their eyes, they were already in an empty space with a gate in front of them. The empty space was completely white. It was not painted white but rather glowing white. Even without explanation, Young-ji and Young-soo could feel the warm and mighty energy emitted from their feet. Meanwhile, the white sky was merely a reflection of the ground. In fact, they believed the reason why the orb looked so dark from the outside was because all kinds of energy could not escape from the orb and was trapped inside by this reflective sky. As for the gate, it was larger than any other gate they had seen before and tightly sealed. It was carved with intricate patterns, and every one of them seemed to be the essence of numerous grand das. Although Young-ji and Young-soo did not know much about the Tao of artifact refining, they could nevertheless tell that this gate was not something humans created. It perfectly resonated with heaven and earth, as though it had been birthed along with the universe. Little 11 proceeded to approach the gate and the twins followed. Before anything else, Little 11 instructed them to touch the gate first. When they did, memories of the past flooded their minds, terrible memories. For Young-ji, he remembered the time when he got scolded by his mother for catching him not studying seriously. The spanking that followed was not one he wished to remember. He could already feel his butt turn red. For Young-soo, she remembered the time when she caught her brother saying he wanted to be like their father and have his own harem. She beat him up afterwards and their relationship was on thin ice for a while. Memories continued to replay, and the twins all made sad expressions. Little 11, who was checking up on the changes, simply waited. Over time, the two children broke free on their own without needing his help. He gave a nod as though this had been expected. Making contact with black ink strength would normally lead to humans being corrupted. Divine spirits are naturally more resistant to it. Just the surface of the profound source gate is hard to make contact with for most humans. Little 11 touched the gate and swept his fingers over it. There seemed to be small dark dust particles on his fingers, which he licked. These particles were the escaped black ink strength from when he opened the gate previously. In general, black ink strength would be eliminated by the surrounding white space within the orb, as yin and yang energies were constantly being exuded. However, since this was from Mo's source, it took a lot more time to purify. What was left on the door was black ink strength trying to retreat back into the profound source gate, but could not do so. It had been so long that only dust-like particles were left of them. Did either of you feel anything change in your knowledge sea? Both shook their heads with Young-ji explaining first. Uncle 11, all we experienced was recalling some bad memories. I don't think I feel anything different with my knowledge sea. I'm the same with Big Brother. Young-soo continued and asked, are we supposed to feel something? I guess it is different from person to person. Your father, when he was weaker, and a few others, reported that they would feel as if their knowledge sea and small universe were slowly being dyed black and get out of their control. Dark memories of the past would flash by, and they relieved it while slowly losing themselves. For you two, I did expect it to have some effect, but the extent was questionable. If you two couldn't handle it, we might as well call this whole thing off. Little 11 said, a little impressed that these two were completely fine after all that. What did you two experience? Just a nightmare, Young-ji stated, not wanting to delve much deeper into the topic. I did not see much. Young-soo answered straightforwardly, with eyes that did not know the word deceit. Little 11 gave a knowing nod of approval and said, well, if it affected you so little, then we might as well just enter directly. Upon those words he placed his hand on the gate and started to push. The world seemed to tremble as the seemingly immovable gate doors started to vibrate. The dust on the gate also seemed to come alive and they drifted more fervently towards the center. When a slit had just opened up, what seemed to be a large black blade immediately shot out. The twins could barely react. with their eyes only seeing a blurry shadow quickly approaching little 11. As for little 11, he had already predicted this would happen. He swiftly removed his hands from the gate and retreated to the side. The blade passed by him, narrowly snipping off a part of his fringe. As though the blade had eyes, it knew that it had missed its target. Instead of retreating back to the slit, it became more aggressive and branched out into 3 sharp abyssal black spear-like weapons. These 3 black spears immediately pointed themselves towards whoever was present. In this case, the twins were now also in its crosshair. Little 11's eyes narrowed and he swiftly took out a token. He was reluctant to use it now, but he seemed to have no choice. It was clear the children would not be able to dodge this attack on their own. Injecting his chi into the token, the whole world trembled. The sky now had array patterns all over it, with the intensity of the light from the ground becoming exponentially more blinding. "Close your eyes," little 11 roared as the spears raced across the space between them. Yang Ji and Yang Su immediately reacted by closing their own eyes. Though frightened, they trusted their uncle's words. The spears that approached them initially seemed to sizzle due to the surrounding light. But soon a bright flash engulfed the world, turning everything into white. No matter how dark an object was, the light was so strong that all manner of darkness was eradicated for that brief moment. The spears lost their structural integrity and they started to crack. Those web-like cracks spread and reached the trunk of those branched-out spears, even affecting past whatever it was behind the gate. Soon, those parts furthest from the door started to break down into dust as they scattered. However, with the strong light still in the surroundings, they broke down further as if nothing was left. Yang Ji and Yang Su, who managed to protect their eyes from that flash, could clearly hear someone screaming. However, it was not from any of them. The scream was from behind the gate. The scream was of great anguish, filled with rage and reluctance. The next moment they could hear something slamming against the gate, but the gate did not seem to be able to close. The thing behind the gate obviously wanted to prevent any more light from outside to enter. However, the slit in the gate still persisted despite all the effort it gave. Chapter 60-19 The Surprise Behind the Profound Source Gate. Despite the screaming backdrop, Yang Ji and Yang Su felt a comfortable sensation all over their body. It felt as though the air around them was caressing them in a warm embrace. Soon enough, this warm sensation faded and the screams behind the door also slowly mellowed out. When silence returned without any instructions, they both slowly opened one eye to check on the situation. Seeing how everything had calmed down, Yang Su sighed in relief while Yang Ji went to check on his sister. "Don't let your guard down. The enemy is still there," little 11 warned, though he knew Mo well enough that it was fine to take a breather at this point. After all, that child would never want to do something that could potentially harm it. Nevertheless, better safe than sorry. This was the first time little 11 had to use the primordial flash to defend against Mo. All previous attempts were always with experts who knew of Mo's strength firsthand. They were on guard before they even tried to open the gate, so it was unnecessary to go as far as to use the primordial flash. Little 11 naturally would prefer not to use the primordial flash if possible, since it did take up mountain piles of 9th order yin and yang element materials. Even with moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light, such an amount would take time to accumulate. Currently, it could at most be fired 2 more times. Still, little 11 was a little surprised by this sudden attack. This was the first Mo had been so aggressive. Normally, once the gate opens up, Mo would not attack. Rather, Mo tended to be more cautious when dealing with any newcomers. The last time Yang Kai was here with little 11, Mo literally hit some corner of the space behind the profound source gate. Even for Yang Kai, the space behind this gate was too large to explore, with only darkness in sight and his limited divine sense. Even if he wanted to find Mo, how could he be certain that Mo would not just hide in another location once it sensed him approaching? For Mo it was like a fish swimming in water, while for others it was like walking in a quagmire. For Yang Kai, he did not feel like he could spend so much time on a wild goose chase. Not after he had already spent more than a decade searching without any fruitful result. Even the profound source gate was only a gate to this unknown space. It did not contain this space itself. Even after refining it and studying it, all Yang Kai could do was open and close the gate. In fact, for all its grandeur and mystery, Yang Kai truly believes that was the sole purpose of the profound source gate, to keep whatever was in this other world from getting out to their world. All Yang Kai managed to do after so long was to ensure that nothing would leak out of the gate under his control, and open it for Little Eleven's goals. That being said, when it was others that ventured deeper into the profound source gate with Little 11, Mo would be open to attacking them. After all, it knew who it could pick a fight against and who it needed to avoid. Nevertheless, with their preparations, these attacks could be shrugged off. Unfortunately, the environment inside was not exactly friendly to the others. Regardless of the preparation, prolonged exposure to this space seems to corrupt them in one form or another. Without exception, all would have to leave this space before a year had passed. This was regardless of them being divine spirits or humans. The three of them waited for a moment for things to settle. Yang Ji and Yang Su followed Little Eleven's words and stayed alert. Fortunately, nothing else really happened after a few breaths had passed. Seems like we are in the clear now. Mo should be avoiding being close to the gate at this point in time, which is the perfect opportunity to fully open the gate. Little 11 said as he once more stepped closer to the profound source gate. This time, to prevent any incidents, he directly stood in front of the gap and pushed the gate open. Rumble once again, the world-trembling tremor spread. As Little 11 had said, nothing truly happened as he was pushing the gate open. Even when the gap was now too large for him to push any further, nothing else occurred. It was truly anticlimactic. However, Little 11's next words sparked curiosity within all its listeners. What is going on? Hearing those words, the twins could not help but look over his arms. Behind the gate, illuminated by the light, they saw a unique scene that they had not expected. In fact, even Yang Kai would not have predicted this scene to be in front of them. The furthest depths of the gate was completely dark. As long as no light touched that location, it was completely dark by the abyss. This stood true to Little 11's explanation of the place to the twins. However, what laid closer were the things that interested them. They were plants. Actual plants. However, these were not the typical plants that they could find elsewhere. The plants were pretty much all of the same color of blackish blue or blackish purple. It was only with the light that their outline and slightly different coloration could be spotted. Otherwise, everything would be uniform black. Uncle 11, didn't you say that the whole space behind the gate is just an empty space void of anything? Yang Ji could not help but ask. Despite this being a pressing and reasonable question, Little 11 would also like to know what the hell was going on. This was not here the last time. Something must have changed. Little 11 now hesitated. This was not something he thought was possible. Chapter 60-20 Strange Flower. This is impossible. How did something like this possibly appear? Little 11 started to question everything, recalling all the past expeditions inside. However, nothing came up. These had truly just appeared out of thin air. Without being able to contain himself, Little 11 rushed into the profound source gate and directly went to pick one of the flowers. The moment he touched one, a familiar feeling washed over him. There was no need for someone else to explain it to him. He already knew what these were. So that's what it is, Little 11 murmured, which did not go unnoticed by the twins. Still in front of the gate, Yang Ji questioned, Uncle 11, did you figure something out? Little 11 gave a slow nod and explained, this is all made using black ink strength. But it is at the same time also not black ink strength. Yang Su shook her head at this contrary answer. She asked for more clarity. So what is it? Little 11 picked out a flower and moved back to the twin. The moment he crossed the gate, he could see the flower gradually losing its original form. It was apparent that the closer he got to the light outside, the more the flower seemed to wither. This is made using black ink strength. To create another life. Little 11 turned around and pointed at the ground behind the gate. In essence, this is no different from black ink strength. But it exists separately from MO, as though it is another entity. This is not much different from the black ink clansmen in your history lessons. As you can see, because of the primordial flash, the part directly in front of the gate does not have any of these plants. It is only at the periphery, with the gate being opened up, that we can see these plants. Yang Ji and Yang Su cutely bent their heads forward a little to get a better look at the flowers. They were certainly dark and strange-looking, but at the same time quite cool as well. Their shape was no different from the ones that could be found outside. They were not all homogeneous, with some variations between them. At the same time, their placement was random, as though it was an actual flower field. Youngji could not hold back his curiosity and asked, "Uncle 11, can I hold that for a moment?" Little 11 hesitated for a moment but relented. After all, they were still safe here. "Okay. Just be careful. If anything goes wrong, make sure to shout out for help." Little 11 passed the withering flower to Youngji and cautiously watched. The boy took it with both hands, trying to get a feel of its texture. Even when it touched his skin, he did not have the same back memories flood back into him again. He saw that his sister was also curious, so he handed it over to her. When she felt it all over, she could not help but comment, "It really feels like a flower. The stem is tougher. The petals are softer and smoother. Just that, it's a bit colder, yeah. But I guess it's colder because there is no sun inside." Youngji replied with a tilt of his head. Meanwhile, Little 11 questioned, "Huh? The black ink strength is not affecting them at all? What is going on?" Although Little 11 expected things to be fine, he was still shocked to see how the black ink strength from the flower had no effect on them. He questioned if it was due to the flower already withering, but that did not make sense, as even the remnant black ink strength outside the gate had affected them. The only way to test this out is for them to go in and touch the flowers inside. Little 11 quickly shook his head. In fact, due to these major changes behind the primordial source gate, he believed it to be wise for them to retreat first. Since it was to just get a cursory check of the situation, and not really to find Mo, Yongkai was the best candidate to do it. The father should make sure it's safe for his kids, after all. Little 11 mused, and was about to open his mouth when something shocking happened. The withering flower suddenly began to expand, like a final desperate move. Moving along with it were the flowers behind the gate. A torrent of black shot out from behind the gate, while the withering flower quickly tried to stretch back to the gate. Unbeknownst to Little 11, it was at the instant, when the withering flower expanded, that black ink strength began to affect Yongsu. The black ink strength this time was definitely more potent than the first time she had made contact with it. However, the effects on her were more muted as well. It just caused her to be disoriented this time. Nevertheless, this disorientation was enough. If she was still in perfect condition, she would have instinctively thrown the flower away from her. However, with her hand still held onto it, the expansion of black ink strength naturally got wrapped around her fingers as it sought to escape. As though having learned the lesson from the previous attack, the black torrent moved faster than before. It would not give Little 11 the chance to use the primordial flash again. Before primordial flash could activate, the black torrent made contact with the outstretched, withered flower and started to pull back. This time with Yongsu with it hand stuck. There was not even a scream from her as she got silently pulled closer into the gate. She did not even feel her feet being forced to be dragged against the ground. Not even the two arms that wrapped around her waist were felt. Youngji had reacted quickly to grab onto his sister. Unfortunately, his meager strength was not enough to pull her free. In fact, he had made his own situation worse as he got rapidly pulled in as well. By the time there was a bright flash, the two children were gone, with Little 11 cursing how the situation had gotten drastically worse. Sullivan. Guys, any feedback so far? Draggy? Want more action? Want more world building? It's okay as is. Chapter 6021 released. Darkness soon envelopes his eyes as Youngji could only see the faint light behind him disappear. It was no longer a matter of going back at this point. All he wished for was his sister's safety. In the pitch-black darkness, there was no point looking around and relying on his eyes. He started to close his eyes and used his divine sense to grasp his surroundings. The most important thing right now was to avoid making contact with black ink strength, lest he too got caught up like Yongsu. If he did, he might loosen his grip and truly lose his sister in this forsaken darkness. His divine sense spread out like a tide. Unlike the outside world, this place seems to suppress it. He could feel his divine sense being encroached upon and get pushed back. In fact, there was a constant tingling sensation, but thankfully not much else. Unbeknownst to him earlier, a net had been formed around them. A net that kept them from escaping. As for the surroundings past the net, there were unusual mountains and rivers. Suppose trees and grass were also in abundance, with flowers and fruits scattered about. As for the limits of where his divine sense could reach, the rivers were the denotation of the boundary. The prohibitive and encroaching sensation got infinitely stronger the moment his divine sense got close to these rivers. He could even feel the dangers of the waters himself. He focused on the scene ahead, and frighteningly enough, the plants in front of them seemed to warp themselves to pull them forward. It was as if they were made of some kind of slimy substance. They would disfigure and pull from the front, and once Yangji and Yangsu got past them, they would return to their original forms. It was through this method that their momentum quickened the deeper they went. Yangji began to frown, and he immediately tapped into his space ring. We need to quickly escape. The next instant 2 crystals of blue and orange came out. Yangji firmly grasped onto them with both hands and the mark behind his palm started to glow. A bright flash immediately enveloped the whole area, scorching off all the black ink strength around him. Trees, grass, even the soil, none were spared. With him at the center, there was even a massive pit below. Naturally, the he and Yangsu had been freed from their constraints as well. Ops! Yangji quickly grabbed a hold of Yangsu before she completely fell into the crater below. He felt it unnerving to fall into the crater, so he decided to just stay in midair with her in his arms. Thankfully, the effects of black ink strength did not linger on her for long as Yangsu soon regained consciousness. In fact, she was immediately confused as she suddenly felt warm arms under her but nothing in sight. She questioned if her eyelids were opened as she tried to open them to only find that the scene before her was genuinely pitch black. "Brother, are you here?" she asked, a little unnerved. "Yeah. Start using your divine sense. No point relying on our eyes here," Yangji said with a sigh. Yangsu did as she was advised to see a strange scene around her. She could already make sense of what had happened from fragments of her memories. Even the crater below was something she deduced her brother had created. What made the scene strange was the crater underneath them reforming itself, as though the whole ground was alive. However, a more thorough investigation of her surroundings was halted by her brother. "Since you're fine, can you get up on your own?" Yangji asked, with his arms already being lowered. But I'm still a little dizzy," Yangsu complained as she took advantage of this opportunity to wrap her arms around his neck and playfully held on. "Just get off me already," Yangji nagged as he completely took his arms off her. Yet she clung onto him using even her legs. "Seriously, just get off me already. We're in danger right now, and Uncle 11 is no longer here with us," Yangji persisted to say. "Well, we are not in that big of a danger." Yangsu shook her head and explained. "If you are able to make that crater, that means that whatever they had given us is extremely effective here. We don't exactly have an unlimited amount, you know? And we don't really know what might happen here," Yangji pointed out, believing they should remain cautious. "I guess you're right. But, I don't think black ink strength will affect us that much if we get more exposed to it," Yangsu said and continued to give an account of her experience. "I don't know why, but I did feel that the effects are weakening the more I get exposed to it." Then do you want to stay here longer to try out your theory?" Yangji said, believing that they should have enough resources to last long enough to test this out. Well, I guess it would be safer to head back to the exit for dash." Before Yangsu could finish speaking, she frowned, and Yangji had already moved. Yangji tried to tear open a void crack, but he could not do so. The best he could do was fly off away from this place. After all, just underneath them the whole ground was quaking. What seemed to be sharp spikes seemed to be forming, ready to strike at them. If he did not escape at this time, then when would he? As expected, those spikes launched at him and his sister, but they were clearly still tethered to the ground with a thin string connecting the two. They were frighteningly fast, moving quicker than them. Without the ability to tear through space, they were truly just sitting ducks here. Chapter 6022 World Change. Arg. I can't tear through space here. The space principles are strange. They aren't the same. Yangji cursed as he tried to gain some distance from the black spikes. For the twins, they had no small number of adventures with their family to different universe worlds and small universes. However, such places all have the same world principles within them. The world principles here were too different from the outside world. In fact, mastery over the certain principles outside need not necessarily mean one would be capable of manipulating principles inside this place. Once Yang-su heard what he said, she was quick to react. Still on her brother, she took out another pair of crystals and caused another explosion. Everything around them turned into a white flash once more, and the spike chasing after them disintegrated into white. Then again, since this has happened once, the twins were certain this would happen again. Even if they had mountains of crystals, if they kept this up, eventually they would run out. The best was for them to retreat back outside. However, would this strange place allow them to? The world, seeming to have acknowledged that such means were too minor to handle the children, began to change tactics. The landscape itself started to shift, with mountains and rivers bending and twisting. The landmass below them started to rise in one direction. Their form no longer seemed solid, changing to something more fluid. Rivers and earth mixed into one, indistinguishable from each other. They raised to form a tsunami, wishing to engulf the two. The twins were naturally alarmed by this. Yang-ji and Yang-su both braced for the incoming attack. Without speaking, Yang-ji took out an array plate while Yang-su took out more crystals. With a little bit of chi inserted into the array plate, it began to spin and 8 flags shot out. They each covered a cardinal and ordinal direction. A translucent sphere of around 9 meters in radius formed, enveloping the twins. Meanwhile, Yang-su was prepared to launch another purifying light, once the tsunami got close enough. However, before they did anything else, the whole tsunami seemed to freeze in place and a voice came from above at its crest. The voice was neither booming nor threatening. It was more calm and collected. "Stop. We do not wish to fight." Yang-ji and Yang-su naturally looked up to see a few figures gathered at the crest. These figures certainly did not seem human. They were humanoid but certainly not humans. Some had more arms, some had longer limbs, some even had carapaces as skin. Regardless, there was a particular figure that stood out amongst the rest. This figure definitely emitted more pressure than the rest. In terms of his aura alone, Yang-su and Yang-ji were certain they could not best him. That was just how overwhelming his aura was. Isn't he in the Emperor realm? No, maybe the Dao Seal realm? Yang-ji and Yang-su both thought. After all, they would be able to tell a person's cultivation if they were weaker than them. Anyone stronger had to be above the Dao Source realm. However, this person's aura was not overwhelming to the point of reaching the open heaven realm. Then again, who knows if this figure was suppressing his cultivation? From afar, the figure held out his fist, as an indication for his men to stop moving. He knew that if the weak were to get involved in this, their deaths would be fruitless. Such a time had long passed when the weak were used as useless cannon fodder. Now they served a greater purpose. Furthermore, he was personally confident in his own strength, which would be able to suppress the two children. Thus he went down alone. From the crest of the tsunami, he leaped down and stopped directly in front of the twins. Naturally, they both had their guards up, with Yang-su already prepared to unleash purifying light. This light used to haunt his armies in the past. Yet now it was just a reminiscent scene. He repeated his words. "We are not looking to fight against you. Lay down your arms." Naturally, how could Yang-ji and Yang-su possibly comply? If they did, they would be helpless chickens. Instead, their grips tightened on the objects they were holding. Seeing this, the figure sighed and added, "I see that there is no helping your need for caution. In that case, I just ask that you do not unleash purifying light here. I am Emo Na Yi, and I believe you are the children of Yang Kai." Once the twins heard his name, they reeled back. Of course they would. This was the Black Ink clansman, the royal lord. Their father had praised numerous times in the past. Though they were enemies, there was a sense of respect for each other as soldiers on the battlefield. Their father had highlighted how out of all the royal lords, no Black Ink clansman, Emo Na Yi was special in his eyes. He was the only one with wit, cunningness and bravery. Every one of their battles were always fights inches away from death. How, like their father, Emo Na Yi had climbed through the ranks of originally being a territory lord to pseudo-royal lord to an actual royal lord. How he was the first and only to accomplish such a feat. Though enemies, they might actually share more similarities than differences. It was just unfortunate that they never had a moment of peace to really get to know one another. Other than crossing blades possibly, That exchange of drinks at No Return Pass marked their only time to get to know one another. The twins naturally heard of his eventual fate. It made it all the stranger how Emonayi was currently here, still alive. Furthermore, he knew who they were. They questioned their ears if they heard wrongly. But his next words confirmed that this was reality. Young kids, the battle against your world and the Black Ink clan has ceased for thousands of years. Why have you come to our land? Emonayi questioned. It was not in an overbearing manner or anything. Just an actual question that showcased his curiosity. Yang Ji and Yang Su hesitated to explain. After all, the reason why they were here had something to do with their Uncle 11. They did not know if sharing this information with the enemy would be a detriment to the overall cause. Seeing how the children were not speaking up, Emonayi just shrugged and moved on from the topic. Although he did want to know, at this point it was not truly necessary. These children would not really amount to much in a battle, and if anyone stronger crosses the gate, he would be alerted of it. Currently, no such thing had occurred, so he was assured they did not exactly come with hostile intentions either. If anything, he already had a faint guess, as the Holy One's other half was detected at the gate. To show his intentions first for them to let down their guard, he confessed. Nothing good will come of starting a war again, much less doing harm to the children of Yang Kai. Your father is basically the best guarantor you have, so no need to be so wary. Yang Ji and Yang Su thought for a moment, and realized this to be reasonable. However, Yang Su realized the contradiction. She got off her brother and moved in front of him, directly questioning, "Then why did you kidnap us?" You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.